Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Planning Board is now in session, Monday, November 30th, 2020. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law 3018, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting or participate in the public hearing may do so in the following manner. Again, going to www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So first item on our agenda tonight is a discussion item, the Master Plan Committee update. Mimi.
Good evening. The Master Plan Committee last met on November 18th, at which time a presentation was given on the objectives, goals, and recommendations from the schools in recreation. We'll be meeting again on December 16th at 7:30. All of our documents are available on our Google Drive, which can be accessed through the town website on the Master Plan Committee page. And that's it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing, 7 Chestnut Hill Road, major site plan approval. This public hearing is continued from July 13th, August 10th, September 14th, September 28th, October 19th, November 2nd, and November 16th. We'll ask the town planner to give us an update on this project. Karina.
All right, so last planning board meeting was November 16th. I wasn't attending, but Sarah did, and thank you for taking care of that, Sarah. You did a great job.
You're cutting in and out, Karina.
Oh, I am? Can you hear me? Move a little closer. Okay, that's better. All right, at that meeting, there was an extension request granted for continuation to the public hearing to this evening with an action deadline of December 4th. In the interim, we drafted a decision for the major site plan approval, which was sent to the planning board as well as the applicant team for review. And we received a couple of comments that we can go over once we're ready to review the draft decision. I just want to point out for the record that although the public hearing started in July 13th, there were a couple of months in between there where the trustees of reservation had to coordinate with the Conservation Commission to iron out the parking requirements and restrictions due to the conservation restriction. Following that happening, we immediately got them back into the planning board groove with a updated plan that shows all the parking in the farmstead and not using the trailhead parking. So that was a good solution, a good resolution, I should say. And that brings us to tonight. We've received comments from Fuss and O'Neill on November 13th, which also were distributed to the planning board, the applicant team, and they were predominantly waivers, requests, and just reiteration that they were exempt from the lower impact special permit. So that brings us up to date, and we do have a draft decision with draft conditions.
Good evening, Bob, DA. Welcome back.
Evening.
Good evening.
Did you want to add anything to that, please?
I think that was a good summary of sort of where we stand. I think we've tried to provide everything that you had requested of us. And so we're eager to, answer any questions you may have and hopefully find some resolution.
Very good. So Karina, the action of the board relative to the draft decision is two. One is to look at the waivers, and the other one is to look at the conditions.
Correct.
Can you take us through each waiver one at a time?
Sure. So as you turn to the draft decision, there is a section 8 and 9 that still has to be completed for final. That's a list of the documents that were submitted during permitting. I want to just point out that under findings on page 2, item 1, says the proposal is for the construction of a 2,000 plus or minus barn. We're going to insert the word square foot right there. To define what the 2,000 was. And then it takes us to the waiver requests. So the first waiver is the waiver from zoning section 174-10-2A. Submission shall consist of the following elements: ownership, zoning, use and general location of structures and topography within 300 feet of the property lines of the site or adjacent land contiguously owned within the site. And then in italics is kind of the reason for the waiver request is due to the relatively large property, approximately 108 acres, and the relatively small project rework with details. So that would be a waiver from that section that they don't have to show ownership and zoning 300 feet beyond the 108 acre parcel.
Okay, we'll take it down, each board member. I'm okay with it, but we'll see how it goes, and then there'll be a motion to either to grant it and see if that passes. Mr. Mills,
I'm good with that.
Mr. Stein,
Yep, that's fine.
Mrs. Latrell,
All set.
and Mrs. Houlihan.
Yes, that's fine.
Entertain a motion to grant that waiver.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor. Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Thank you. Next item, Karina.
Second
Excuse me.
waiver, yes?
Do you mind if I share screen so we can all look at the same thing? Or do you
I
not
can
want to
share if
share
you'd
this?
like.
That's fine.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
can
that'd
share.
be great. I think just so we're all looking at the same thing.
Forgot about
I
that.
have it up, Marty. Alrighty, can everybody see my
Yeah,
screen?
thank you.
You're welcome.
There's the first waiver, and now we're on the second bullet item. That's
Okay.
a waiver. Are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Waiver from zoning section 174-12B. Required vehicular use areas shall be paved with bituminous concrete. And the reason for the waiver, the existing parking lot has a gravel surface. We feel the pervious surface is most appropriate for the character of the farm and to maintain the aesthetic quality of the farm. As we seek a light footprint on the landscape, we are also requesting that 7 of the required parking spaces can be sited on existing grass field area.
So we'll do
Essentially,
this,
those are the aprons.
okay. We'll do this one by exception.
Oh.
Is there anyone on the board that is not okay with this? With granting this waiver? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to grant the waiver.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Next one. Next one, Karina, please.
This is a waiver from zoning section, and I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The prior waiver was for the, having a paved parking area and driveway access. So this waiver is from zoning 172-12B1. Access drive shall be paved bituminous concrete or other pavement authorized by the planning board for at least 15 feet inside of the street or property line, referring to the aprons at the entrance of the driveways. And the reason is the existing gravel access drive from Chestnut Hill Road to the property line, corresponding with the front face of the existing stone wall that enters the gravel parking area, is approximately 6 feet in length. A paved driveway apron is proposed for the purpose of creating a slight berm to prevent runoff from Chestnut Hill Road from washing across the gravel parking areas. The length of the paved driveway apron is approximately 9 feet. So instead of 15, it's 9, but for a reason.
Again, by exception, anybody that's not okay with this? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Next one, Karina.
The fourth waiver is from zoning section 174-12B3. If there are 8 or more parking spaces, there shall be provisions for identifying individual spaces, in other words, striping. The reason for the waiver request is they feel that the striping of a gravel lot is not practical or sustainable. The 2 ADA spaces and access aisle will be delineated with signs. Since the gravel parking lot has been in service, the farm has not experienced any significant problems with the organization of parked cars.
Again, by exception, anybody not okay with granting this waiver? Hearing none, entertain the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Thank you. Next one, please.
Next waiver is waiver from zoning section 174-12E, and there may be a slight correction. It might have to be E3, and we'll verify that when we put the final document, the last revisions. So waivers from zoning section 174-12E3, off-street parking spaces shall be provided according to the following schedule. And the reason is based on the parking requirement schedule, the required number of parking spaces is 41 spaces. This is based on a tabulation of 35 parking spaces required for a 96-seat barn with 3 attending employees and 6 parking spaces for a 900 square foot CSA retail operation. The provided number of spaces is 38. The 2 operations do not frequently occur simultaneously. Therefore, the provided number of spaces satisfies each requirement independently. It also reflects the desire to not overdevelop the farmland with parking fields. Essentially, it's a waiver of 3 parking spaces for the project.
Okay, anybody not okay with this one? Hearing none, entertain the motion to grant this waiver.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
You, next one, Karina, please.
Waiver from zoning section 174-12E, not more than 25% of the required parking spaces other than for dwellings shall be located within the required front setback. Then the waiver, the proposed expansion to the existing gravel parking lot meets the dimensional requirements of the bylaws and improves its overall functionality. It is conveniently located off Chestnut Hill Road. Relocating it inboard of the site would not only add additional gravel surface, but also change the existing farm field layout. So essentially, they have parking there now. The parking is being expanded with a larger lot. So they're asking to continue to allow that, is my understanding.
Okay. By exception, anybody not okay with this waiver? Hearing none, we'll entertain the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Thank you. And the last one.
All right, the last one here says waiver from zoning section 174-13. Section shall apply as specified below to any new building. Waiver of the requirements of this section is requested due to the relatively small proposed development program, the current view sheds on an agricultural site, which is an important focus of the conservation restriction.
Okay, again, by exception, anybody have a problem with granting this waiver?
I'm just not clear what this waiver is for. Sarah, I just want to make sure that it's clear. 174-13. Sorry, I just want to.
Is that landscaping?
Yes. I believe that is, yes, landscaping, exactly.
Yes, yep.
So we'll clarify that with landscaping. So it's a waiver from the landscaping requirement for the project. Sorry.
So anybody not okay with granting this waiver? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Very good. Right through those waivers. So now let's move on to the conditions.
Okay. I just want to point out, Sarah, just scroll down a little bit. So the conditions. Do you want me to just go through all of them and stop where there's changes or requests for changes?
Well, the first one is boilerplate,
It is. Yep,
and the second one,
correct. So number 3, we got a request from DA Hayden to reword that so that it fits, it matches the language in the conservation restriction. So instead of there will be no pigs allowed to be kept anywhere on the farmstead property per the conservation restriction, DA Hayden asked that we replace it with commercial hog farming and commercial piggeries fall under prohibited acts and uses per conservation restriction on the property. Maybe we put both sentences so that it's very clear, or we can replace it.
well, there's a difference because keeping a pig for a small period of time is a lot different than what DA is proposing.
So hi, it's DA. Is it all right if I speak?
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you. I would just wanted to be sure that if the planning board was using language and referring to the conservation restriction, that it's important for us to honor the conservation restriction and the language therein. And I didn't want to have anything come up with conservation where that might ask the question, well, why aren't we using the exact language that's in the CR? So that's why we suggested the use of the actual language that's in the CR.
So Karina, number 3, we should make that boilerplate by saying there'll be no pigs allowed to be kept anywhere. Have that applied to all site plans. Kidding.
I was following you for a second.
Okay. So let's go around. It sounds like we should get rid of 3 and replace it with what DA is proposed. Mr. Mills?
Well, can I just say one thing before you move? Would it hurt to keep both of those sentences in there so it's crystal clear? Kind of like a layman's term, the first sentence. Unless you
Can't-
think the CR language is succinct enough for the intent of,
I frankly think the CR language is clear and accurate, and we wouldn't want to have a sentence in here, Karina, that says per the conservation restriction when the language that's in this existing sentence is not what the conservation restrictions.
right,
You know,
okay, I see what you're saying, okay. Sorry, Don.
So DA is proposing to get rid of number 3 and replace it with her sentence. And I'm okay with that. Mr. Mills?
So just so I'm clear, that the conservation restrictions does not allow pigs?
Commercial piggeries in hog farm.
Why don't you read it again, Karina?
The statement that DA wants us to put in here is commercial hog farming and commercial piggeries fall under prohibited acts and uses per CR on the property. Per the
Again-
conservation restriction on the property.
Again, that's a lot different than a couple of piglets there for a short period of time. This says that basically that creature is not allowed on the farm, and that's different than what DA is saying.
Is that the intent, Bob or DA? Is that the intent that there's no
So,
pigs at all?
may I ask just a question? Is this something that we don't have a problem if the planning board is saying you don't want to have pigs on the farm, in the farmstead? If that's something that is a condition, it should just be written that way rather than referring to the conservation restriction. However, if you are saying that you want to follow the letter of the conservation restriction, then the sentence that we suggested is what should be in there. So maybe it's just a matter of clarification as to what the planning board's intention is with this number 3.
Well, I guess when it boils down to it, I'm more comfortable with sticking, I'm not trying to make it more restrictive than the conservation restriction. So I'm fine with going with what, referring back to the conservation restriction that was negotiated for months and months and months with the town and the family. So I'm good with that.
Mr. Stein,
Yeah, agreed.
Mrs. Latrell?
I'm fine with that, but I think I'd reword the sentence a little and say no commercial piggeries or hog farms per the conservation restriction.
DA?
That's absolutely fine with us. Just as long as we're using that language, that's perfect.
Mrs. Houlihan?
Yeah, not to belabor the point, I'm just confused as to why we'd even put this in as a condition if it already exists regardless on the conservation restriction. Why is it applicable in a planning board condition?
That's what I was just asking too, Marnie, because we were surprised to see this.
I believe that
I mean,
at a
I'd vote
prior
for it.
meeting, it was brought up. Thought either Andrew, somebody else brought it up. There was some kind of issue with this conservation or something happened where it triggered this to be a point of attention. So it was included, I had it in my notes to include it as a condition so that it would be crystal clear
Yeah, I
that
just,
that was a condition.
I know it was brought up to me by residents that they were confused why there were pigs on the property in the past as we were going through this early on. And I think I'd asked Karina to look into what the conservation restriction stated, and that we just make sure everything's in order before we start approving additional work on the property.
So I guess my only comment is that based on the conservation restriction, there could be hogs on the property as long as it's not commercial use. So I think that, I don't know how that's planning board's responsibility, but I would just say if that's the case and we want to insert this as a condition, that it's specifically the exact language that the conservation restriction has. And then it's not, we're not creating any new verbiage or restrictions.
That okay, DA?
Yes, yes, and that's the sentence that I proposed to Sarah is the exact language from the conservation restriction.
That okay, Mimi?
So there are pigs allowed on the property, but not under those conditions of the conservation restriction? Do I get the intent?
Not a hog farm or commercial piggery.
But they could have they could have 1 or 2 pigs there for grazing or for people to come look at or something like that. So it's not a zero tolerant pig condition is what I'm trying to say. In other words, there are avenues that they could have them. They just don't want commercial. Is that correct?
That's what's up.
That's our understanding.
So then we should leave the language the way it was. We should leave it exactly like DA had described it. Or as Mimi
Correct.
said, no commercial hog farms or commercial piggeries per this conservation restriction.
I'm in favor of exact language as the conservation restriction, no altercation, no altering.
I am too.
Same.
Mimi? Jesse?
That's fine with me.
I'm fine.
Yep.
Okay,
Fine.
so we've, can move on to the next one?
Please.
Number 4, animals of any kind are not allowed to inhabit the newly constructed barn. Want me to just continue unless somebody stops me?
Yeah,
Okay. Allowed lighting for number 5, allowed lighting for the development will be as shown in the approved plans and as per the lighting specs and photometric plan is approved. This is a standard boilerplate condition as it states there in number 5. So
Keep
after
moving.
said, keep moving. All right, number 6, light fixtures shall be no greater than 3,000 degrees Kelvin color temperature warm to reduce blue light. That's the standard. Number 7, landscaping shall be in conformance with the plans as submitted by the applicant and approved by the planning board. We included that because there were some tree removals proposed, so we just want to make sure that those are what was approved is what gets removed.
that's more boilerplate, right?
We got a request for Mimi Luttrell to add a condition. I'm going to put it after number 7 if it's approved. All parking shall be within the farmstead envelope. It's not currently shown there, but we'll be inserting it between 7 and 8 if it's if the planning board wants that and the applicant agrees. All parking shall be within the farmstead envelope. Does anyone
Okay.
object to that?
Excuse me, this is Bob Murray, that relates to the use of the barn, for the use of the barn?
Yes.
Yes.
It's consistent with the findings that the barn, patio, and parking are all within the farmstead envelope.
Should we say all associated parking?
Sure.
Or you want to leave it open saying all parking shall be within the farmstead envelope?
Well, it's parking specifically for trustees' events because there is parking, there is trailhead parking, which is not within the farmstead envelope, and that should remain.
So if I might suggest the language perhaps of that Karina was suggesting where parking for the barn should be, something to that effect, so that it's not confused with the north parking.
So all parking for the proposed barn shall be within the farmstead envelope?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay,
Number 8, all utilities serving the project shall be installed underground, including any extensions from existing lines or poles external to the property. That's a boilerplate. Number 9, prior to the lapse of the appeal period, 3 sets of final approved plans shall be submitted to the planning board for endorsement. Number 10, prior to start of construction, a major site plan approval decision shall be recorded at the registry of deeds with written proof of recording provided to the planning board. We add this condition now so that there's no confusion in the future, people not being able to find information on the project when they do title searches or whatever. So that's become kind of a standard. And that's just the decision, not the plans. Number 11, within 2 weeks after the final approved plans are endorsed by the planning board, electronic PDF file and AutoCAD files shall be submitted to the planning department. That's to make sure we get a signed copy back in electronic format to reduce our paper loads here at the townhouse. Number 12, standard boilerplate pre-construction meeting with the planning department shall be held prior to any construction activity on the site at least 14 days prior to start of construction, and applicant shall provide written notice to the planning board of the anticipated construction start date and construction schedule. Number 13, also standard. Prior to initiating site disturbing activity and construction, the applicant shall provide in writing the name of the person responsible for site disturbing activity and responsible person for site during construction to the town planner and building commissioner. So that if we get complaints or we need to follow up if there's a storm or whatever that impacts. Number 14, and then after construction is complete, that is the as-built plans shall be submitted to the planning department. That's a standard requirement, as well as to the DPW building department and Board of Health. And those are the, that will be a total of 15 conditions. Because we added one between 7 and 8.
okay. So, unless somebody has an objection, then we would entertain a motion to accept these, to include these conditions as written and or revised. Mr. Mills,
I make a motion, we accept the conditions for 7 Chestnut Hill Road as reviewed and amended this evening.
Seconded.
motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Bob, DA, all set?
Yes.
Yes.
Hearing nothing else, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes?
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, so we've gone over, we have all the materials, we've gone over the waivers and the conditions. So it would, unless, and we'll give the public and ourselves an opportunity to add anything else. And if not, if there's no more, then we would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment.
Mr. Mills,
I make a motion, we close the public hearing for 7 Chestnut Hill Road, major site plan approval.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, we've closed the public hearing. The next item would be to entertain a motion to approve the site plan. Mr. Mills.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the site plan for 7 Chestnut Hill Road, major site plan approval with conditions reviewed this evening.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
The site plan is approved. It took us a while, and I'm glad that the town planner was able to explain to the public the reason for the length of time that the site plan public hearing was open. But this was really an excellent, very popular project, and we wish you the best of luck with it.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate all of your input.
We
Yes.
truly do, and we're very much looking forward to having everyone come and celebrate when the barn is up and ready to go. It'll be a wonderful asset for the community. So thank you so much.
The next step would be for the town planner to finalize the decision document and then have it signed by me. Once that's done, then it gets filed with the town clerk and the 20-day appeal period begins.
Right, and then, Don, we'll also need to get the plans endorsed by the planning board members.
Right.
So, we may need a second set. I have one set here. The condition might call for 3, but we'll work that out and we'll coordinate to get those plans in and signed. And then, so that the applicant team can have one and we have one for record.
Sound good? Sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds terrific.
Okay,
Thank you.
again, best of luck. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Okay,
you
thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Have a good evening.
You too, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing. 60 Richards Road, Mooney Baseball Field lights, major site plan approval. This is continued from October 19th, November 2nd, and November 16th. We will ask the town planner to give us the latest progress on this proposal.
Okay, so, here. The last planning board meeting was November 16th. Again, Sarah, good job covering that. And, an extension request was granted to continue the public hearing to today, November 30th, with action to December 4th. In the interim, I received information back from Massachusetts Office of Disability. And
You're gonna get a little closer to the microphone, Karina.
all right, sorry. I received
breaking up.
information back from Mass Office of Disability, our contact there, saying that, you know, they were still looking into the threshold requirements for Mooney since it was separate parcels, and not specifically, but in a generic sense. So they did give me some preliminary feedback that wasn't in an official letter yet, which they said they will provide me after they meet again, in regards to whether, you know, it's based on how you pay taxes, I believe. If the tax bill for all the 5 parcels that make up the contiguous town hall property there, if it all goes to the same person, they may consider it as one big entity, even though there's different parcels. But if that's not the case, it could turn out that if it's counted on the individual parcel, which is worth like, I think it was assessed at 400 and something, and the project is 200,000, then it may trigger that threshold that some of the other features need to be made accessible. And again, that may happen under a different, phase or whatever, but I just wanted the board and Tim to be aware that they hadn't given me anything in writing per se officially, but that was the discussion they had at their last meeting on the 16th. So as soon as I get that information, I'll forward it to Tim to decipher what they choose to do with that. There are also avenues to request variances if it is required. Then your consultant could help you go ask for a variance from that requirement. We also received Fuss and O'Neill review comments on November 20th, which we submitted to the planning board and to the applicant. And we prepared a draft decision with draft conditions and a list of waivers. This afternoon, I received a response to the Fuss and O'Neill review comments from Traverse. I haven't had a chance to review it fully yet. It came in at about 5 o'clock. I had no power at home, so I couldn't forward there until I got here to the office at about 6:45. So I did forward that to the planning board members, and it's on the Dropbox. And that brings us to this evening. So we can review the waivers, review the response comments that Traverse provided to Fuss and O'Neill's review. I want to point out that Fuss and O'Neill's review had several waivers listed, which we incorporated in the draft decision. And also some comments on design revisions that were still required. So I put those revision requests or requirements from Fuss and O'Neill into condition form so that once they're addressed, they could be removed as a condition. But that's the method I use so that we don't miss any of the Fuss and O'Neill comments that are still lingering to be addressed. So, sorry, that's all I have. One long sentence.
Okay. So if we go through the Fuss and O'Neill November 20th, 2020 response to the revised plans, how is what you received today at 5 o'clock going to stack up against that review? You said you haven't even looked at them.
Yeah, I looked at the Fuss and O'Neill comments, but I wasn't able to completely go through. I just briefly scanned the red responses. So what we typically do is when we get a response to Fuss and O'Neill comments, we have a set of plans that shows anything that was revised, and then we send it to Fuss and O'Neill for a final review. And then they sign off that the last comments were addressed. If the comments are simple review comments like, you need to label this way, and we can usually put that in as a condition. But if it's something like a construction detail is missing, like one of the review comments for Fuss and O'Neill was that a water crossing detail, standard detail, should be included in the plans to show when the electric line is crossing over the water main that runs along the side of the street there. So that's important to show so that the contractor knows when he does cross over a water line, what kind of provisions he has to put back in protection between the utility and the electric line. So something like that. Then Fuss and O'Neill would review that technically, that's accurate. So, one or two of these comments are something that can be fixed in my opinion, as part of providing an updated approved set that would have all the revisions in it. But things like relating to, the Muskow controller and how it's mounted, and things specific to the electrical plans, I wouldn't have the expertise to say they met that requirement or not. So when you look at the Fuss and O'Neill comments, the first several of them are waivers at the discretion of the planning board. And then you get to, for example, number 16, for clarity purpose, the proposed light poles and towers should be labeled consistency throughout the plan set. And the response was noted. And then Fuss and O'Neill received the revised plans, but the plans didn't appear to update that request. So that the lights were still, although the site plan itself removed the label and just called them 60-foot light and 70-foot lights, the remainder of the plans still had A1, A2, B1, B2, or A3, A4, B3, B4, and Muskow had a different numbering system. So the whole idea of that comment was that the 4 light poles are called the same thing throughout the whole plan set, so that there's no confusion. So that comment still exists. That wasn't addressed. And if I look at the matching response from Traverse, they say that on the site plan, the labels were removed based on previous comments. And then the labeling on LD1 and C1, these are correct. And then ES2, the electrical plans, said these will be adjusted to A1, A2, B1, B2, and then the Muskow plans are correct. So it seems like the electrical plans still needed to be adjusted to label the light poles the right way. So I'm belaboring that because that's, that's something probably they could pick up in an approve, with their final set, and I could check that and all that. But then you go on to general notes, number 20. General notes on sheet C1, which is the structural plan that Muskow provided for the bases of the lights. And it indicates electrical fixtures must have a minimum of 10-foot horizontal clearance from any obstructions. So in the general notes on C1, it's the last note on the structural plans. It says that electrical fixtures must have a minimum of 10-foot horizontal clearance from any obstructions. And Fuss and O'Neill says, in review of the site plans, this required horizontal separation distance does not appear to be provided between light pole footings and existing features. Please review and revise as required. The comment was responded to with note revised per Muskow review. Then in this newest submission, Fuss and O'Neill reviewed it and said the general note on sheet C1 has not been revised. Additionally, the call out on LA 1.01 still indicates 5-foot clearance. Plans shall be consistent and the proper clearance shall be provided in accordance with the requirements of Muskow. So I guess if you look at the site plan, so the structural engineer said you need 10 feet clearances. But then if you look at the site plan, the light poles, I believe, are like 5 feet from the existing stormwater line, which they were concerned with because it doesn't match. So the structural guy either has to agree that it's 5-foot clearance, not 10, or the site plan has to show that you have 10-foot clearance or 5 feet, and the structural guy changes his opinion of the clearance. Sorry, another long sentence, but I'm just trying to explain that. So that comment, that's a more serious comment to the project because the clearance is vital. If you're 5 feet, I don't know, if the structural engineer is concerned that the basis for this light should be 10 feet and it's shown as 5, that storm drain, I don't know if it's 24 or 36 inch, is a void there. So if you put a base there, you don't have the soil stability you would if you had soil there. So that's my engineering perspective on that. So I think that's an important comment that still needs to be addressed and clarified. And if I look at Traverse's response, they said plans will be consistent and adjusted. So I guess it's up to the planning board to decide if they want Fuss and O'Neill to review a set of plans that shows those adjustments or not, along with some of these other more technical comments. And then lastly, there were comments on the electrical plans and design. Things like include a sequence of operation for lighting controls based on the conditions indicated in the variance on the electrical plans. The comment was Musco has provided the sequence in their spec to the town. Fuss and O'Neill responded, the sequence is not included in the specification included in the report submitted. The ZBA condition that indicates light operation is indicated on drawing G1.01, and they recommend electrical drawings refer back to sheet G101, so the electrical contractor is prepared to conduct programming required once Musco controls are installed on site, etc. So there are two or three other electrical comments which should be ironed out, including the Musco contact controller and how that is mounted at the site. A little bit beyond my expertise, but generally it appears that there are these 3 to 4 technical comments from Fuss and O'Neill that should
You're
be.
allowed to address some of these comments because there's answers to some of them.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't have a chance to, so I'll give it the floor back to Don. I just wanted to just explain, you know, some of those last lingering technical comments.
Okay. So I'm going to go through Tim. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening.
So some of these comments go back to the original 50 comment letter. I get the date of it from Fuss and O'Neill.
October 15th.
It's over October 15th.
Yeah, October 15th.
So the question is, I guess, if between then and now, these things haven't been addressed, why would the planning board believe that they ever will be?
Well, because I'm going to tell you that we're going to address it to get it to the point of approval that you want it. You know, I like to think it just got lost beyond all the other detail that we've been trying to put in, so I don't want to make excuses. But, you know, all I can say is we'll get it done and we'll address it. That's my best answer, unfortunately. And Art, I don't know if you want to shed any light.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of these comments. I mean, if we go through the Fuss and O'Neill comments, so the first 7 have all, or the next 5 have already been waivers that were approved in the previous planning board meeting. The next,
Just to point out, the waivers haven't been granted yet. There was just kind of a straw poll.
my understanding is at the last meeting, we voted on waivers. The planning board voted on waivers.
On the 16th?
We went through each waiver, we read them and voted on that. Or, well, not we, I mean, the planning board did.
Are you sure that wasn't just a discussion? Because usually it needs a motion with a, and a second. And we usually do that, right, like we just did with the previous one. We do it right before we do the conditions.
I believe that was done. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know what you're talking about. I think what I recall from 2 meetings ago, we kind of went through the waivers to make sure everybody would be on board with them. just to
Okay.
get a consensus. And then what we do at the final meeting is we go through them and there's actually a motion and then it's granted with a vote. So I can.
So then
see-
I'll go back. I'd like to continue to go back through these notes because some of these
Right.
notes, the planning board, for clarity purposes, the proposed light poles tower should be labeled consistent throughout the plan set. So we went back and forth as we were asked in the Fuss and O'Neill comments to remove from the landscape plans, move to the engineering and electrical plans. But some of the requests from the planner in the planner's comments were if we removed from our plans, we would have removed the elevations on the light poles, which were requested. So we put those back in. And then the electrical plans, ES2 indicates A3, A4, B3, and B4. And the reason for that is because during the zoning board hearing, there was an original request for all the plans. There was 2 sets of poles, but it's down to 1 pole. The request for the 5-foot clearance indicates if you read through the actual plan in the comment, it says fixtures must be located to maintain 10-foot minimum horizontal clearance from any obstruction. So the fixture is 60 feet in the air, which means we can't put anything vertical next to it, is what that comment's referring to. It's not referring to the location of the poles. The lighting controls, they're asking for I believe they're asking for a couple of components on the lighting controls, which in this instance, I would argue that clearly Fuss and O'Neill doesn't have experience with Musco controllers and Musco light fixtures. They're asking for a few pieces on the controller that just don't make sense when using a Musco light pole, and Mike can talk to that more. But again, they're asking for things that just don't make sense related to how a Musco system works. And the system is a complete system, so it comes as one piece. The last few are related to MedVec, which again, in the last meeting, we had extensive discussions around the MedVec letters. So,
All right, can I add one thing? If you go
Sure.
back to number 20,
yeah,
that discusses the clearances, okay? And if you look at the structural sheet C1, it's the last note, it does say electrical fixtures must have a minimum 10-foot horizontal clearance from any obstructions. In review of the site plans, this required horizontal separation distance does not appear to be provided between light pole footings and existing features. Please review and revise. The note that was initially stated there was note revised per Musco review. So if the note was correct, I don't understand that response comment.
well, I had an extensive
Note revised per
discussion with Musco regarding that note and the discussion that we do have pieces on the site, and it was indicated to me that the sighting fixtures were for the fixtures. So again, we don't have anything within 10 feet of the fixtures.
So then,
It's the vertical for the fixtures for the sway at the top of the pole. That's the reason for that note.
and that may be the case, but then Fuss and O'Neill's current comment was the general note on sheet C1 has not been revised. Additionally, the call out on LA 101 still indicates 5-foot clearance. Plans shall be consistent and proper clearance shall be provided in accordance with the requirements of Musco. Your response in your current letter says plans will be consistent and adjusted. So if it's
So I will make the adjustment to say on LA 1.01 that says 10 feet clear, but again, they're not referring to the same thing.
So should the comment really say, and I'm not telling you what to do here, but maybe it would be clear if the comment had said, this separation distance relates to the fixture and does not apply to this. But it says here, plans will be consistent and adjusted. What does that mean? I'm just trying to figure this out so we can move forward.
So again, I will adjust the plans so that they match. So we'll have 10 foot of clearance. The other one will be 5 foot of clearance based on LA 101, because we're going to adjust the plans to match. Right now, we're talking about things that are fixture heights, and the reason that they're there is for sway on the pole so that they don't hit anything. The clearance at the base of the pole is 5 feet. So it's horizontal clearance at the base of the pole.
So you're saying the code, so where they're placed now is accurate. You're saying it's the fixture at the top of the pole that has to be 10 feet from anything.
That's correct.
So then why would you have to change anything?
Well, we were just going to clarify the adjustment. I mean, again, my discussion with Muscos was to look at that plan and adjust. If we could adjust the note to 5 feet. Again, I'm just trying to respond to the comments, and I'm not sure I understand what the comments, I think the comments weren't really clear.
I think it's because the plan was a little bit, it appeared to not be consistent. So I guess just from me as a town planner, as an engineer background, I still have a question. What is the code? Can the base be is the base required to be 5 feet or 10 feet? And is the fixture required to have a 10-foot clearance? What is the clearance for the base?
Base has 5 feet. The base has 5 feet, but again, the clearance is, we also have within the pole some flexibility based on soil conditions, where we may have to adjust poles. So that our intention is to protect against the underground storage.
Yeah.
Basin
So maybe
and that's why that note is on the plan.
Right. So maybe Mike Berry can answer this. What is code for separation distance from the base to, say, the fence or the stormwater, the underground stormwater? Your structural, what is the code requirement for that base and anything near it? Like, what's the closest anything can be to that base?
It really depends on what the depth of that underground object is that we're in proximity to. But typically it's about 5 feet. That note in the structural is talking about clearance at the top of the pole and 10 feet for the fixture sway. At the base, there is no movement. So it's not like it has to be 10 feet from any structure. That's more for the sway at the top. Structurally, if there's underground objects, they will ask to be a certain distance so they're not adding lateral bearing capacity on that underground structure, but that would all be calculated into their foundation design.
Okay, so I guess if the structural engineer stamped his structural plan, he saw the current layout of the site plan that shows the base. Because his stamp is from 2018.
On the newest.
Yeah, the current set you included the structural plan with the 2018 stamp. So I remember
newest one I have
this. Huh?
This year. I don't know what one year.
I think it says 2018, his stamp on C1.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, the newest one that's in the project, which Art, that's the one that we've.
Yeah, the newest is the latest that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you recall,
2020.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that when this plan was submitted, I remember, and I think I emailed Art that please note that this is a 2-year-old stamp. If you change the site plan, make sure you check with the structural guy to make sure where you're placing the light still meets his structural approved stamped plan. Because if you move the location of the base close to something, he might not know that. So I said, the planning board may potentially ask you to provide a letter from the structural engineer saying that his plan still holds because it was an older stamp. And usually 2 years is like the threshold. So, at that point, the team decided that they would go forward with the structural plan that they had. But I did point that out, just make sure. Because if the base is next to something and it fails, those poles are tall. I mean, that could hurt, that could kill somebody. So that
Yeah, the
was,
one I'm looking at is from July 20th of this year.
what's that?
The stamp design that I'm looking at is July 20th of this year.
That's C1
Yep,
on it. The stamp next to his signature says 20.
yep, 7/20/20.
My C1 plan says 8/30/2018.
Yeah, I think the plan set that we have, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, I think this could be easily remedied if the confusion with the clearance and what it means, if the response comment had said, please note the 10-foot clearance is for the fixture at the 60 or 70-foot height. The base is allowed to be at 5 feet clearance and is such shown per approval of the structural engineer. But that's not really clear. So if I go to C1, the plans I have here,
Can I ask the board to check their set to see, this is hard to believe that the set of plans that we have is different than what the proponent thinks we have. Your plan C1 has on the lower right stamped by the PE. Mine says 8/30/2018.
Yeah, I concur, Don. And also in the Dropbox, the 11/09/20 revised moonlighting plans that are in there also are stamped with that same date.
This is unbelievable.
so
I agree with Karina that these are all fixes that need to be made and are not huge in themselves, but to get to this point and still get a set of plans that isn't what you expect us to have, it's very frustrating. I mean, how did this happen?
Mike, is that a plan?
I would say at one point, I mean, we've been going back and forth with conflicting comments from Fuss and O'Neill. It's been frustrating on our side too, because we've been updating plans and removing notes, and then getting notes back about the notes that we removed. So I kind of feel the same. It's been a little frustrating on our side. I feel like we've addressed all the comments. I feel like some of the comments, to be honest, are clearly, again, when I read through the Musco controller review, there's a discussion that they don't understand how the Musco controller works. I thought we had a good conversation the last time we were around about it. And yet
Who did you have the conversation with?
There was a discussion on the controller the last time we were at our last 11/16 meeting.
Oh, okay, but that discussion was not had with Fuss and O'Neill.
Well, I guess how do we have that conversation with Fuss and O'Neill if they're not on the meeting?
That's what I think is going to be the next step, which would be to ask Fuss and O'Neill to get on the line with your appropriate people, whether it's Art or you, Mike, Tim, anybody else, including the structural guy if necessary. I think Art, when you were explaining and clearly said that that Fuss and O'Neill does not understand the Musco controller. Well, that should be a conversation, and it sounds to me that you'd be able to clear that up with Fuss and O'Neill and have them either agree or somehow have enough knowledge of the systems to ask to have you change it. But we need agreement on these things from our consultant. And I and the town planner will suggest tonight that we arrange for a discussion between Fuss and O'Neill's engineer and your appropriate people ASAP, so that we can get these things cleaned up, have the proper language, and some of the language that we're hearing tonight verbally, if it's placed on the plans, we'll clear it up. That's what I'm going to suggest. Relative to the waivers, if the board agrees, we could go through those and vote and get those out of the way, or if they're not granted, have a discussion about that one at a time, so we can make some progress in that regard. But we're sitting here with a plan that's different than the plan that you think we have. Tim, do you have the 2018 stamp plan or the 2020 stamp plan?
The one I'm looking at on my computer at home is the 2018. Karina, do you know when you sent an email about that? I'm just a little frustrated that this is coming up publicly now about that date. To address it now. And
Yeah.
Mike, is there a drastic difference? I mean, I understand the need for an updated stamp, but Mike, is there a drastic difference between the 18 and the 20 stamp plans? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was just looking at that. If anything, the newer one has the A poles 2 feet shallower. But outside of that, it's all the same. So diameter, depth is all the same for the most part. It hasn't changed.
So can I just ask, Mike, what are you looking at that was dated 2020?
An updated foundation design based
For this project?
Yep.
Is that in anticipation of a building permit application? Why would you have that plan and we don't have it?
That I don't know. I was trying to look through and see.
Because that might answer the question. I mean, that might solve the problem that if the structural engineer reviewed the current site plan and he adjusted the plan and restamped it in 2020, then it would be simply inserting that plan into the approved set. If that is the correct, if the structural engineer saw the site plan as it is laid out now and agrees that that is how the basis should be designed. But if you're telling me that if you guys don't know why it's different, then that's I think what concerns the planning board.
No, if structural updates the foundation design, it's based on all these minor revisions we've made over the various meetings in terms of every time we tweak a fixture, it's something that we have to rerun through, just like you're talking about, Karina, with, if you shift a pole, it changes the structural loading in the EPA of that pole. So our structural folks would rerun the structural design and update the stamp and say, okay, we're still good with it, but it's all been updated based on the very latest design. So that would have been the reason that we would have had an updated one created with these.
And what's the date? What's the date of the one you have?
7/20.
7/20, and it's the application was submitted, I don't have to tell you, but the application was submitted in September. So I'm wondering why that plan wasn't in this, because I remember specifically talking I think, Tim, you were there and Art was there, Sarah was there, and I was pointing out how, even prior to that, that when you start to prepare your plans for this, be aware that that's an old stamp from 2018, and that the plan, I said, it's at your risk to submit it, but the planning board may require that you supplement it with a letter from the structural engineer certifying that the plan is still good to go. But now you're saying you have a plan dated July 20th or 2020, an updated plan that was never even included. I don't know how that is planning's error. I tried to help you and I tried to tell you, bring the, focus on this. So I don't know why that plan wouldn't be there. Maybe that's not the right plan Mike has. I don't know. Maybe it's I don't have the
Karina,
answer.
I'm not saying that it's your error at all. I don't want you to
Oh,
think.
no,
So
I know.
I just want to make that clear. But my point, I guess I'm just trying to say is, or trying to find, is that if there's not a drastic difference between the two, and I understand this is on us and we'll take responsibility for that, but is it not an opportunity to insert that plan come the final set?
I would think so.
Okay.
I would think so. I'm not-
Obviously, I would hope so. That would to clear that up.
Yeah, and it goes back to, the confusion of that clearance issue. A little more detailed response from the consultant, whether it's the electrical or from Travers, explaining to Fuss and O'Neill in their response that, no, the plan will be consistent, instead of saying, oh, the 10 feet corresponds to the top of the light, to the fixture at the top of the pole. We meet that clearance. If you're referring to the base, the structural engineer approves 5 feet of clearance. Would have been 2 sentences, the proper plan, and that comment would be gone. And then I just want to point out the last 2 comments that are regarding the medevac. I have that plan on file, and I had asked for that early on. I remember our correspondence when medevac approved it, and all I saw was the email, and I specifically asked you, Tim, you have the plan, and you sent it to me. So I have that on file, and it matched. So that's not a concern. And then, about the landing zone lights on top, I think that was a non-issue because that's not what was proposed here.
Correct.
Right? So that was just an attentive comment. So those last 2 comments are not the big deal. I think it's more to do with this clearance issue. The confusion now with the structural plan, Mike saying there's a newer plan, why from July, when the application was made in September, and I did specifically, and I do have an email pointing out, and it may even be my review comment, that I pointed out that's an old stamp. You need to have your electrical plans with the current stamp because you changed the layout. If the bases didn't change, I remember specifically saying this, that plan may still work, but you may be required a supplemental letter to confirm that the layout still works, as opposed to a whole new structural plan. And I do have that because I remember asking about the electrical stamp at the same time. And that's why, Diorio provided an updated set of electrical plan sheets that he stamped with the current stamp. Otherwise, they'd be 2018 as well. So I think that these are workable fixes and they can probably be done pretty quickly.
Correct.
But the confusion has to be cleared up. And as far as the Muskow controller, I believe Mike Muskow is explaining that the controller is actually an exterior component to the enclosure, and it may be on its own pad, but I'm not sure that's represented on the plan. And maybe that was Fuss and O'Neill's question, like what is the story with the controller? And if they're asking, what is a contractor going to ask? And the last thing you want is some big change order because something's not on the plan. Could cost thousands of dollars more to the town.
I can't speak to where it shows on the plans in terms of where it's located. That would be more Vinny in terms of where he's locating it. It is a NEMA 4 enclosure, so it can be inside or it can be outside. But some of their notes in terms of adding a photo cell and things like that to the system, the controlling system has an astronomical clock built in. So it's newer technology from the old time clock. So adding a time clock would be going backwards. Whereas this adjusts with daylight savings time and all that. Whereas a time clock, you have to physically go there and adjust the new time. You lose power, you got to go back and adjust it. This does all that for you automatically. So those kind of comments are things that they don't understand how our control system works.
Okay, so perhaps in the response comments to their lighting control, Fuss and O'Neill's lighting control comments, instead of simply all controls are programmed as part of the Muskow system, a note will refer to G101. Maybe something what you just said, elaborated a little bit in a few sentences, which I've seen in the past when a consultant provides that feedback to Fuss and O'Neill, they typically respond with, that's clear, we no longer have that comment. It's up to the discretion of the planning board because it's been clarified. But when you have a comment that just says, plans will be consistent and adjusted, or, if it just explained that, it might have clarified it and we wouldn't have to clarify it now.
I guess
That's all.
I personally would prefer a phone conversation with them just to, I guess, hash out any additional questions that come up in regards to controls, just so that, there's not a lot of back and forth and reviews and resubmits, but.
Right, and we've coordinated that before. We've had other consultants ask us that when it comes down to some of these more specific technical items that are more specialized, we've had the consultant contact Fuss and O'Neill directly, and then they just keep us in the loop so that we have record of what was actually decided. And then that gets reflected in the comments very quickly. And then those get swiped off the board because nobody's concerned anymore. So, I think we're really close if we could, in my opinion, I'm not the decision maker, but if we can iron out these last few inconsistencies and clarify, because the clearance is important at the base. What is allowed? What is being shown? Is that okay? And if the updated plan indicates that from the structural, that would have been a no-brainer. You know what I mean? So I've said my piece, Don.
So what I'd like to do is go through the waivers, because I think that's something we can do tonight. Get those out of the way. Either waive them or deal with them. And then Karina, does the draft decision document, does Tim have that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. But before I go through the waivers, I'd like to just take a second and ask the planning board members at this point in the meeting if they have anything to say. Mr. Mills?
No, I have nothing more to add.
Mr. Stein?
No, I'm fine with proceeding to the waiver discussion and vote.
Mrs. Luttrell?
I would feel more comfortable having the applicants in Fuss and O'Neill and perhaps, Karina iron these things out, and for us to have updated plans that are the same as what the applicants have. I'm not comfortable with there are other plans out there floating around that we haven't seen.
So Arguably, I mean, we brought that point up last week about the potential of meeting with Fuss O'Neill. We didn't get the sense that that was a possibility or necessary. So, you know, I have to say it's a little frustrating to hear this meeting now. You know, that things that it seems that we can iron out right here in this meeting. Now, my understanding, it seems that we're looking to push this out even further. So I just don't. It's just frustrating to think that, you know, it sounds like we addressed what we needed to address here. I don't know what much more we can do to it. I mean, I understand the conversation that could be had, but, you know, is it going to result in anything different than what we discussed here tonight? So I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I just think I find that frustrating. I guess I'll just say, and I apologize, Mimi, for interrupting.
I think it's frustrating for us all, Tim. And I think at the last meeting or the prior meeting, we were assured that all the Fuss and O'Neill comments had been addressed. And although some of them may not be a big deal, they haven't actually all been addressed. And I, for one, don't have the technical ability to know whether the explanation from Musco would be, you know, whether that addresses the comment from Fuss and O'Neill or not. I'd feel much more comfortable having Fuss and O'Neill discuss that with Musco and come to some agreement, because those things are kind of the crux of the whole project and, you know, part of the conditions from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So those are not small matters in my view.
What my question was to go through the waivers.
Oh, okay.
Mrs. Houlihan?
I'm fine to go through the waivers, but I agree, like, I do think it's important. Tim, I think we're all equally frustrated to know that it was an updated plan as of July 2020, and we're still all looking at something from 2018. Recognizing that you held back an updated set of plans for the costs, and we appreciate that, but that we didn't even have the original set that you were working with. So with that, I'm fine to proceed with the waivers. I don't know if you want to go through other pieces of the conditions. I had some comments on those as well, but I'm fine to proceed, and then pending a conversation with Fuss and O'Neill and the applicant, obviously we can have next discussions.
Well, let's do the waivers and see where that takes us. And then we can drift through the proposed conditions and see what comments come up from that. As long as we can make some kind of progress here tonight with what we have, despite what we don't have. So I'm looking at the Fuss and O'Neill letter dated November 20th. And the first item is major site plan review. It's at the bottom of the first page, and it talks about a list of abutters will be provided.
That's a moot point, Don. We have
Okay.
that. Yep.
All right, I'll move on. The next one has to do with the 300 feet. Uses within 300 feet. So,
Do you want me to go through the waivers, Don, one by one? And
yes, please.
okay, because they do coordinate with the Fuss and O'Neill review letter from November 20th. So the first waiver, request waiver from zoning 174-10B2A. Major site plan submission shall include ownership, zoning, use, and general location of structure and topography within 300 feet of property lines of the site or adjacent land contiguously owned with the site. It is requested that the site plan is sufficient. Again, this is the typical case where the project site is usually the contiguous property, which is made up of 5, is a lot bigger than the project site itself. So it would be a lot more intensive to add all that information beyond what's necessary.
Is there anyone on the board that's not okay with granting this waiver? Okay, the next step would be to entertain a motion to grant the waiver.
So moved. Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, Karina, next.
Number 2, waiver from zoning section 174-10B2B15. Major site plan submission shall include drainage, including detailed design, date, piping, sizing, pipe sizing, etc. The plan includes drainage directly related to the limit of the work. There's no drainage or grading work as part of this project. It is requested that the site plan is sufficient. A lid was exempt, so any drainage calculations didn't appear to be applicable for the lighting, the electrical trenches, etc. that were being installed.
Okay, anybody on the board that's not okay with granting this waiver? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Reno.
Third waiver from zoning section number 174-10B2B17. Major site plan submissions shall include topography at 2-foot contour intervals. And again, the drainage for the entire site would be cumbersome and not impacted by this project. There's no drainage or grading work as part of this project. Is requested the site plan is sufficient. I suspect this intent of the waiver request was for, it's generally very flat there, and the contouring they showed was sufficient for the site plan.
Which it is for most site plans. The reason we have that in our code, though, is for some topography that's really varied and steep, that where this requirement would be essential. Anybody not okay with granting this waiver? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, next one.
And the last waiver that I have is waiver from zoning section 174-12.1K, light trespass limitations. The plan shows less than 1% of light trespass, according to the consultant. Plan shows less than 1% of light trespass on the neighboring property line across Parkerville Road, minimal and not visible to the naked eye. In addition, Fuss and O'Neill responded, Fuss and O'Neill believes 1% of light is trespassing on the neighboring properties is minimal and not visible to the naked eye. However, section 174-12.1K indicates light shall not trespass. It's at the discretion of the planning board to allow the minimal trespassing of the light on the neighboring property.
Is there anyone on the board that's not okay with allowing the 1% trespass?
I am opposed to waiving this.
Anyone else?
I'd like to just point out, Don, that specifically speaking, I believe that the horizontal trespass was 0.02 foot candles, and the vertical trespass of light was 0.04. So
I had a question about this. The photometric plan that's in the Dropbox shows like, if I'm looking at it correctly, it's 0 in the abutter's yard. So what are we talking about? Light trespass on the adjoining fields? Because that doesn't seem like.
I'm talking
I
about
I
the,
just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing.
The plans I saw, the light trespass is zeroed out way up in the abutters yards. And my issue is that the problem with light pollution isn't just what's visible to the naked eye. And I also don't want to impede the abutters' ability to complain about light trespass. Like, we may not think it's a big deal, but we don't live there. So if they have an issue, I think that the applicant should be prepared to shield the lights or do whatever they can to satisfy the abutters. Because at the zoning board hearings and town meeting, those were the objections that were raised to these projects, was the lighting trespass.
So it's pretty rare that Mimi and I disagree on things, but this is just,
So-
this is one thing I think, if it shows 0 on the photometric plan in terms of spilling over into the abutters, then to me, the waiver is valid.
But it doesn't show 0.
I'm looking, so Mimi, on 8, I'm looking at the one equipment list for areas shown, and it has like the perimeter of the area, the photometric, and it zeros for the whole bottom half of the spill area. And then it's like 0.01 up in, there's 1.02, but that's on the, whatever you call it, the minor league field to the left.
Sarah or Karina, can you guys pull that up?
Correct me if I'm wrong, and Mike, if you're still there from Moscow, perhaps you can clarify this. So I'm looking at the 4th to last sheet of the lighting plans, Mike, and it's the grid summary, it's the illumination summary, horizontal foot candles, and it shows the ball fields, the roadway, and then the property line across the street. So it's I'm not sure what to, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets back in the plan set. And it says horizontal foot candles. And if you look at the property line across from A2, the light, there's one highlighted, it says 0.01, 0.02, right at the property line across the street. So you're allowed to trespass light into the street. There's a restriction into the property, but 0.02, that 1 point, is what's reflected there in horizontal. And if you look at the next sheet, which is the maximum vertical foot candles, you'll see in the same spot a 0.04 foot candles. And I believe that's what Fuss and O'Neill was referring to, that is, or
2 decimal points, so 200th of a foot candle, or 400th of a foot candle for the max vertical, which is far below what you'd read on a light meter during full moonlight, or even during any moonlight. But yes, that is showing at the edge of the street, which is trying to follow the bylaws and saying, beyond the property line. But you're talking about, for all intents and purposes, 0, but it's going out 2 decimal points because that's what the system does. But as somebody also was brought up on this before, it's a street that has streetlights on it. So what's 0.02 or 0.04, depending on how you're measuring it, actually going to change anything?
in all fairness, I can say that in my experience, when we provided lighting plans like this, where 0 is required at the property line, we wouldn't do hundredths like that. We would round down.
Yep.
But
exactly.
it all depends on the specificness of the project. In other words, it wasn't a lighting project per se, it was maybe a parking lot. And lighting was a component of it as opposed to a lighting project. But here
Yeah.
you can see on the screen, if you look at the bottom center, there's an A2. Well, you got to keep going a couple more sheets down. Right here, stop. Either one of those. See, one is this, right there. Stop right there. That's horizontal foot candles. And if you look south of the A2 label, right there, it'll say 0.04 or 0.02. So that's across the street, and there are street lights there. So that, you know, that's all I'll add to that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of adding shielding, if you've been in these meetings, I mean, all of our fixtures come with shields. We have looked at this 6,000 different ways to reduce the spill beyond this. I mean, to be at 100th of a foot candle that close to proximity to the field, there isn't any way to reduce that anymore. And again, as Karina just said, you know, we went out multiple decimal points here showing and displaying what the actual is. The reality is that's dark. I mean, it's black to be at that many decimal points out beyond 0 foot candles.
Anything else, Mimi?
Well, my concern is that our bylaw says 0. There have been issues at Choate Field, and those abutters are much further away. And
Yep.
I think we should do everything we possibly can to protect those abutting properties. They're very close right across the street. There's not, you know, huge trees or anything in their front yards to shield them from the lights.
The folks at Choate have a kind of a different, I guess, view of what it's different type of fixture, first of all, so it's completely different technology, and they're seeing the lights. This, in terms of a foot candle that you have called out in your bylaws, that's not actually measuring the intensity or the glare that you're going to see from those fixtures, which is what the folks from Choate are having an issue with. That would be one of the other slides that we've provided in terms of Candela, but yeah, I mean, this design is going to have shields that's going to cap off that light so that those abutting properties don't have that same sort of impact, but it's, I understand your point.
Mike, would the street lights there possibly shed more light than that, than what's represented on the plan? So if you
Yep.
took away the ball field lighting and you just represented the street lights there, would that
Absolutely.
be more than that or less than that?
Typically, a street light is going to have somewhere between, depending on the neighborhood and how much light they're calling for, but there's typically, you're going to have somewhere between 1 to 3, and higher crime areas, you might have 5 foot candles underneath the street light. But it's definitely not decimal points. You'll get into more of the 1/4 of a foot candle when you get in between poles, but underneath the pole, you're going to be several foot candles, without question.
Are there street lights in that section?
Yes.
I believe so, but
Yes.
I think we should move on.
Okay.
We've got enough information. So did Mrs. Houlihan speak to this?
I'm fine with the waiver as requested.
Mr. Mills?
Moved.
Seconded.
So the motion to grant the waiver has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, no.
Houlihan, yes.
4-1. It's been granted. So are there any other waivers?
Nope, that's it. No, that was it for the waivers.
Agree with that, Tim?
Oh, sorry, yes, agreed.
Okay. So, we want to go down through the conditions, the draft conditions. And the reason or what we do with these conditions is to discuss them and give you the opportunity to disagree or agree. But again, I don't think, again, the vote relative to the conditions would be after we close the public hearing. So Karina, you want to take us down through, let's see. Seven conditions?
Ones that are highlighted?
Oh, yeah, I got the pages in the wrong order.
Yeah, I'll go through the boilerplate ones really fast and we'll just stop at the more specific ones.
Just, yes, go ahead.
All right, Sarah, if you want to put the draft there, thanks. Okay, so this is the draft decision for the major site plan approval, Mooney Baseball Field Athletic Lights, 11/24/20. The first one is standard, comply with all the provisions. Condition number 2, it's just pointing to, you have to meet the conditions of all the other boards and commissions, and it's just drawing attention to the ZBA variance that had some conditions in it. Number 3 is the lighting, standard language. For that, number 4, if you scroll down, Sarah, there, okay, thanks. All Musco lighting plans include all Musco lighting plans included in the final approved plan shall be stamped by Massachusetts registered professional engineer.
Right, what we're looking at on the screen is what we had this afternoon, Karina.
Mhm.
Do you see what's on the screen?
Oh yeah, we crossed out prior to building permit application. That was a question I had, and it would make confusion if the final approved plans, then a building permit set had something different. So.
And the code requires the PE, the Mass PE stamp.
Correct. I know there was discussion about a lighting certified person from the program, and when I looked up that program, the scope said that it does not replace the requirement of a professional engineer. Shall I go on?
If there's any comments, questions, disagreement relative to these conditions, let's hear them as we go through them.
My question would be, I'm a licensed landscape architect. Why can't I stamp those plans?
The requirement in the code does list, there's a list of people, professions that can stamp plans. I actually contacted a long-standing member of the Massachusetts board, licensing board of engineers, and went over this with him to see if a landscape architect is within the same hemisphere as an electrical engineer. And because I don't think it is, there's a difference between an architect and an engineer. The Board of Licensing is different for engineers and architects. I was told that, for example, a civil engineer, practicing civil engineer, the board may be okay with practicing civil engineers stamping, let's say, a somewhat routine mechanical engineering design, if that civil engineer can show that in his years of practice he's proficient in that type of mechanical, then the board would be okay with that type of crossover, but never having an architect, landscape architect, stamp an electrical engineered design.
But we're not talking about the electrical engineer design. We're talking about the photometric plans. The electrical engineer did stamp the electrical engineer design lights. We're only talking about the photometric plans. So, I mean, I've done 30 of these projects.
Which plan, what are the plan numbers, Art?
Hold on one second. It's all the Musco plans. So I reviewed all the Musco plans for photometrics. Obviously, the electrical engineering plans, the E1, the E2s, were all stamped by Vinny, who is a licensed electrical engineer. It's
So
only
you're
reviewed.
talking about sheets C1, C2, C2 through 10, and C11?
C2 through 10. The C1 is a structural plans that were in discussion. Those were stamped by a structural engineer. We're only talking about the photometric plans.
C2 through 10.
That's correct.
Is there a reason why why Musco can't comply?
I mean, they're just going to hire someone, an architect, engineer of record, just like they would hire me. It wouldn't be any different. I mean,
Are you saying they would hire another architect, landscape architect, or they would hire?
they would
an
have
electrical?
to. If you're saying they would have to hire, I mean, if it's an electrical engineer, then I will have Vinny stamp them, which we could probably have him do. But again, the only things that are in discussion are photometrics. Everything else has its appropriate stamp, and I wouldn't argue that, I wouldn't stamp a structural engineering plan. We have a structural engineer. I wouldn't stamp the electrical plans, which we haven't. We have an electrical engineer. We're only talking about the photometric plans.
Well,
Which I would argue in that sense actually does fit to what exactly a landscape architect does.
I guess I'll leave it to the board to see how the board feels about this. Although if you can get them stamped by an electrical engineer, then why don't you? I think that
I will, but what it's asking for is a civil engineer. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Is it per a electrical engineer?
Why did you say civil engineer?
I thought that's what the notes I saw said, civil. Is that not true? An electrical engineer stamp is fine.
Okay,
Then we'll have Vinny stamp the plans.
thank you.
Okay.
Next one, Karina.
Number 5, art on the plan set. The cover of the final approved plan shall be stamped by professional responsible for the project design and shall include the revision date of the approved plan. Planning board endorsement lines shall be provided on all plans. This is kind of a easy fix, and it's standard requirement. You have the cover sheet and you only have the endorsement lines on that cover sheet. If we don't have the endorsement lines on all the sheets, it can become confusing in the future what was approved. Because sometimes plan sheets get taken out during construction, etc., whatever. So the cover, just you should stamp it and have the proper revision date on it, because it says September 3rd. All plan sheets should have the endorsement lines on it too. So that's an easy fix. Put the right date on it and stamp the cover, and then add the planning board endorsement block into the title block of the other sheets. because they have to sign each sheet.
That's fine.
Got that? Okay, good.
Number 6.
Number 6, for clarity purpose, proposed light poles to be light built consistently throughout the plan set, regardless of the design discipline. Final approved plan shall indicate consistent labeling of the proposed lights throughout the plan set. That's back to that same comment, so that there's not confusion. I know that you took the naming convention off the site plan. That's neither here nor there, but the other plan set should match. It'd be nice if they all, like on the tennis courts, they're all labeled the same throughout the whole plan set. It's T1, T2, T3, T4. It would be nice and clear if that was the same here. That's that same comment.
That's fine.
Number 7, for general notes on plan sheet 1, electric field shall have a minimum of 10-foot horizontal clearance. This shall be represented on the final approved site plans for light pole footing. So if that's clarified on the structural note or on the site plan, that what clearance goes to what, and that's resolved with the Fuss and O'Neill comment, then that condition doesn't exist. It's not required if we know. If that comment gets cleared up. The confusion was we don't know what needed 10 foot and 5 foot was shown on the plan. It just wasn't clarified. So,
That's on the list to be cleared up.
okay. So that's all right to be cleared, okay. Number 8, this is in reference to Fuss and O'Neill's comment 31A. Electrical plan shall include a reference to plan sheet G101 for lighting hours of operation, programming requirements, and the conditions. That goes to what's going to get worked out with Fuss and O'Neill, and clarifying those 3 comments under the electrical plan designs for lighting control. A and C, 31A and C.
But
So-
number 8 talks about hours of operation. Oh, programming and, okay.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
kind of threw it all together. So the hours of operation, which I've reiterated below, and those were taken from the variance that the ZBA granted. So I guess that would be addressed.
So we're adding a reference to G101 for lighting hours of operation on the electrical plans. Is that correct? And then we're supposed to indicate, show how proposed Musco controller will installed on site and provide construction detail. Can you clarify?
It says the sequence is not included in the specification included in the report submitted by Travers.
Because it,
Zoning board
there's,
conditions that indicate light operation is indicated on drawing G101. So on G101, it looks like
you reference the zoning board hours, correct? Yep,
did
understood.
recommend electrical drawing reference back to G101. So on the electrical drawing, it should just say CG101 for hours of operation. How else do they program the controller, I would guess? I don't know.
Okay,
Tim that would program the hours of usage. So it's not Musco that's programming it or the contractor. It's
for the
Tim.
contractor.
Tim's
Or department.
programming when it's permitted, when they go on, when they go off.
Who does that?
I do. The recreation department would be responsible for that.
So the controller has no programming done by Musco ahead of time, so, oh,
Nope. Nope. It's all customized based on usage that rec department has set up.
okay, so it's not pre-programmed.
Nope.
All right. Yeah, that would help if it was explained in that comment, response comment. Okay. Next part of that was program and conditions. The Musco controller on plan YouTube. Okay. Is there anything else on that, Dawn, that you can see?
How did we go down to number 9 yet?
No, we were on 8.
Okay, no, I'm all set.
Okay. Number 9, indicate, show how proposed Muscal controller will be installed on site and provide construction details. That's in reference to Fuss and O'Neill's comment 31C. So the comment was Muscal controller on plan ES2, which is the electrical plan, is not specified on the drawings and is indicated outside the electrical enclosure that contains the panel and contactor enclosure. Recommend providing spec for the controller and detail how the controller interfaces with the contacts. A photo cell should be specified as part of the controller as it is required by IECC. Do you know about that, Mike? No?
IECC, no, I'm not familiar with what that term is. But that's where I'm talking about. The photocell is antiquated technology to what is actually in the control cabinet that Tim would program.
Okay, so you'll work, we'll follow up with Fuss and O'Neill discussions between you
Sure.
guys.
Yep.
Iron that out and come up with a narrative, with a response that explains it and puts it away. Okay.
Yep.
Fuss and O'Neill, okay. Number 10, light fixtures shall be no greater than 5,700 degrees Kelvin color temperature to reduce blue light. I think the Muscal plans show that. Okay. This was taken from number 11, all light fixtures will be controlled by a state-of-the-art computer control system. That's accurate. Just putting it in there.
That's what we're talking about. Yep.
All right. Number 12, the proposed lights are for the illumination of the Mooney Majors baseball field only. That's taken from the zoning board variance.
So
Number
I just had a question for that, Karina.
Uh-huh.
So I know all the next section is taken exactly from the variant. So the question was, why would we redact some of the wording that they use? And so in that specific comment, they also state that light shall only be used only for players age 12 and under and will not be modified, expanded to accommodate older players.
That was my next question, to add that comment or not, because there are some things that are under the jurisdiction, like redundantly for planning board, like hours of operation, I believe. Some of those things for the lights are redundant, like they overlap the zoning board of appeals and planning. But with that, I had a question here in my notes that said, should we add light shall only be used for players ages 12 and under? It's already stated in the variance. Does the planning board usually condition something like that? And if they don't, then we wouldn't put it here. And if they do, then we would, and it would be redundant to the variance condition.
Isn't that what we just did with Chestnut Hill Farm? We reiterated about the piggery.
Yeah, it's similar to that. It's like drawing attention to it to make sure that it's understood.
But I guess a clarifying question, Karina, and also to the planning board, we've taken all of the variants, like every comment and the variants, and added it to ours. So
Not all of them.
Oh, I just looked and I didn't see any difference in what I saw.
Yeah, I didn't put in things like lights must be LED lights in compliance with town certification as a green community. I didn't put in if police detail is required at Mooney Field, the users shall be responsible for the fee. I didn't put in announcer speakers will be kept at a reasonable, responsible decibel level. So there were some of these more bird's eye view conditions that a zoning board of appeals might include for the light height as opposed to a site plan. Does that make sense? I didn't reiterate all of them. I kind of picked the ones that apply to site plan aspects.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to just defer to Don and the planning board. It's just, again, my naivete, relatively new. I know I'm now a couple of years in, but if it's already stated as a set of conditions in another variance, is it always something that we do? We just restate conditions? Or do we just make a statement that we would defer to all the variance conditions applied in the ZBA variance dated March, whatever, 17th, March 2017?
I guess we could do it either way. I do agree with Karina that we usually wouldn't get involved in the age of the users. You know, have the zoning enforcement officer going down to the field and asking the kid if he's got an ID, if he's 13, or, you know, if he turns 13, you know, yesterday or tomorrow, he can't play tomorrow. So I wouldn't have the planning board get involved in those type of things. So if we could either, I'm not sure if, let's there's no objections to what's written here. Is that right? It's just the idea of repeating some of it, but not all of it. And we might have a discussion within the planning department and maybe get some advice that if for example, our condition just talks about illuminating the majors baseball field only and doesn't mention the age of the kids, then does that would somebody say that creates a conflict, and therefore, because it's not in this condition, then it's out the window. It doesn't, it conflicts with the ZBA, and therefore it's not enforceable. So I think we'll have to take a look at that, but none of these are new. They're just a partial list of what has already been agreed to.
And I will point out that under condition number 2, we do state all restrictions and conditions of other boards and commissions required pursuant to other permits related to the project shall be complied with. So we have that statement in there.
Yeah. Well, let's think about this, Karina. If the board agrees to let us look a little bit into it, the best way to handle it relative to these decision documents, and then report back when we have our next hearing.
Can I just make a point that all these notes on item 13 here all reference the capabilities of our control system that is, still unknown through Fuss and O'Neill. I just kind of wanted to say this is all the stuff that I'm now going to tell Fuss and O'Neill that's already in these notes right here, in terms of the capabilities, the automatic on-off, the hard program that Southborough Rec Department will be programming it. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, that these kind of conditions are already kind of in there for the controls.
So are you saying that it's better to have these A, B, C, D, E, 13 removed, or it's better to leave them in there?
Well, my understanding, these are conditions of the other board, right? That they
Yes.
have.
Board.
Sorry. So, I mean, they're already kind of written in there, and the functionality and the purpose of the control system is kind of already defined, and Tim has those conditions of use and how it's programmed and how it operates.
Is the board?
Sorry. And adding to that, those same conditions are in our general notes on our plans as well.
Is the board comfortable with getting rid of number 13?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mimi?
Sure, because the variance is referenced.
Okay. Marnie?
Yeah, I just think it's redundant. And so if we've already stated it, let's be efficient.
So
In the wording.
we'll knock number 13 out.
That's good. And then probably also number 12, because it's in the ZBA variance as well.
Okay,
We'll knock that one up.
12 and 13. Everybody good with that? Tim?
Tim, you there?
Yeah, I said yes. I apologize.
Oh, okay, sorry. Didn't hear you. Okay, then we're on to number 14. The rest of these are pretty standard. Number 14, all utilities shall be underground, including any extensions from existing lines or poles. Is there a conflict with the electrical plans with that, Tim? I know the utility poles that are proposed outside, you know, in the town right away that will feed the project lighting. Will the lines from the new utility pole be underground to the controller?
Yes, correct, Art?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's a good condition, that those lines will all be underground, so we don't have overhead wires into the project. Okay. Number 15, no permanent structure shall be allowed to be built in the medevac landing zone or that would impact the landing zone. Number 16, prior to the lapse of the appeal period, 3 sets of the final approved plans shall be submitted to the planning board for endorsement.
Well, 16 through 21 are boilerplate.
Yep, boilerplate all the way down. And then 22, attention is directed to the Board of Selectmen's poll hearing required for proposed utility poles. That's just a call out to, you know, pay attention. We put that in there before when there's utility poles proposed. It's a requirement by the Board of Selectmen. National Grid, I believe, puts those in. That can be there or not. It's just a helpful comment. And that's it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Certainly a lot closer to the finish line than we were when we started, at least in my opinion. So I believe the next step would be to request an extension of the approval period. And then to continue the public hearing to December 14th, I think it is.
Hey, Don, just a quick point of order. Do we vote on the waivers that we just discussed?
We did on the waivers, but not on the conditions.
Yeah, we
Oh,
voted
sorry,
on
do we vote on those or? we
On
just
the
hold that as a
conditions?
Discussion.
No, I think that the conditions are, they're okay to wait till the next meeting. I want to make sure that the public hearing is open and
Got
that,
it.
and we're able to see how the discussion with Fuss and O'Neill goes, that may create a new condition, remove a condition, or change a condition. So we made progress on the waivers, and I think by going through each of the conditions, we got some clarity on what the next steps are.
Don, can I interject one last thing? I had a note here, and Mike Berry can probably answer this. I had a photocell required so light can't be turned on if it's daytime. Are you saying the photocell technology is outdated?
Correct.
So that's
Well,
it.
the photocell technology, it's not outdated. It's pointless because the lights aren't going to be turned on until Tim sets a program for the lights to turn on. So a photocell would just be redundant.
Okay, so they program to not turn on when there's light enough.
Right. So, well, a photocell is going to turn lights on like a parking lot anytime it gets dusk and they turn on from a safety feature. Tim's going to
Okay.
program the lights to turn on only when there is a scheduled use out there on the field. So
Okay,
photocell is not really relevant for sports lighting because you're only programming when you actually have a use out there.
okay, got it. So that's a moot point. Okay.
Yep.
And Dawn, I just wanted to point out about public comment. I just wanted, so we don't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the public can comment on those steps probably next. Unless, well, is it your desire, Tim, to continue this hearing to December, is it December 14th? Karina?
It is.
That's our next,
Uh,
I think we'd want to continue it to the 18th, right?
The approval period.
Approval, yeah.
Right, but there's no sense in continuing the approval period if we're not going to continue the public hearing. So the choice is we continue and try to bring this across the finish line at the next meeting, or you don't request an extension, at which means that we would run out of time and the board would have to take appropriate action, which would be to vote on it tonight with all these items open. Or let's see.
I would like to point for the record that we did add this meeting tonight in order to help expedite.
Yeah,
It's not a regularly scheduled meeting.
this is about the fourth time I've lost my agenda. So at the bottom of the agenda, we have the approval. What's the current approval date?
December 4th.
December 4th. So the planning board has enough time to not vote tonight and hold advertise another continue the public hearing to December 4th or sooner, and take action then, which is not planned. There's several options available. So trying to make it simple. It would make sense to, in my opinion, continue the public hearing to December 14th and the approval period to December 18th. Your choice, Tim.
Two questions. One, can you please explain explicitly why we're continuing it?
Because
What
there's
are we
open,
what are we looking to? I just want to know clearly what we're looking to achieve between now and the potential of a continuance.
Karina, you have that, you have those items. We already discussed it.
Yes, and just to recap, the structural plan by Muskow, it's our understanding that Mike Berry has a newer version that addresses the clearance issue. And it's a newer version in general, right, from July 2020, which would confirm to the planning board that the newest site plan has been vetted by that individual so that the clearances defined are acceptable, whether it's the base close to the fence or close to the stormwater underground drain is appropriate, and that the 10-foot clearance still remains with the fixture clearance at the top of the pole. And then there's the labeling of the lights, that they're consistent. Should be a quick fix. And then there's the electrical plans and design comments from Fuss and O'Neill, which triggered the electrical plan shall include reference to plan sheet G101 for lighting hours. So that was going to be an update. And then indicate how the Muscout controller will be installed on site and provide construction detail. And then there was one more, no, that's not on this one. So that's it. The remaining open comments from Fuss and O'Neill related to the electrical plans. The structural plan being the most recent updated one with the 2020 stamp that we know, and the labeling of the lights. Did I miss anything, Don?
I don't think so.
So
Okay, and Don,
one is an easy fix because you obviously have that structural plan already.
Mhm.
Number 2 should be an easy fix by relabeling so the lights are all consistently labeled. And number 3 is working out these last 2 to 3 electrical comments with Muskow and Fuss and O'Neill coming to terms.
Now, is it the wish of the board to receive brand new sets? Or is this something that we can fix and insert for the final approval set?
I can tell you that for a long time, I have advised the board and the board, different boards that I've been on, the planning board had a rather strict rule, which was we don't vote unless the final plans are on the table in front of us. There have been some exceptions to that where if some additional information is agreed to and can be added to the plans in the 20-day appeal period, so on. But I would think that we could, if we got a note back from Fuss and O'Neill capturing the agreements that will be made, and that note, that letter from Fuss and O'Neill would say that the proponent has agreed to include these revisions on a revised set within the 20-day appeal period. So I think I'll ask the board, but I think the answer to your question is we can probably not have the revised set on December 14th, as long as there's an agreement as to what the final set will contain.
Okay. And then Don, did I mishear, or did you mention that there is a possibility that we could meet Friday to meet the original deadline instead of extending out 2 weeks?
Well, that's one of our options that I wouldn't recommend, because first of all, we don't know when we can huddle with Fuss and O'Neill and Art and Mike. So, and the purpose, the reason we extend the approval period beyond, one of the reasons beyond the hearing on Monday is if there's just no agreement and the proponent draws the line and says, no, not going to extend, not going to request an extension. I want you to vote. In which case, the board would either decide to do nothing and let the approval period lapse, or the board would somehow agree to have a meeting that's still within the approval period and either deny the project, which I don't think anybody wants to do that, go anywhere near that, or sit down and create conditions that you're probably going to have to wind up doing anyways between now and December 14th. So I'm not, the board can overrule, can outvote me, but I'm not recommending that we have a meeting on this Friday.
Don, might I recommend that, Tim's question about whether he should submit revised set of plans. If they're able to address these revisions, then maybe they should put it into a set or 3 sets, provide them
You
electronically.
got it, you're breaking up, Karina.
Oh,
What,
I'm sorry. In responding to Tim's question about a revised set of plans and to vote on that, I think it's a good idea to have a revised set. If the applicant's planning to make these revisions and address these final comments, then it would put that plan set in final approval condition and ready for endorsement as well. If they're going to address these in conjunction with feedback from Fuss and O'Neill saying, they don't need to do this with the electrical component. We understand that this is how they're approaching it, therefore that satisfies it. And then they don't have to show that on the plan, but labeling the lights, inserting the plan for structural that's current, and letting Fuss and O'Neill see that as the final set, or we see that, it might be good to have. Otherwise, we're in the same boat. We're talking about conditions that weren't addressed or are addressed in name only.
I agree. I prefer that. But if it's,
PDF
the-
acceptable? I mean, are we talking physical prints or could it just be a PDF file? For financial reasons and to expedite.
In order to vote on?
Or just to get you a final set that you can look at. To show that we're making those adjustments.
And then when would you submit the final approved plans? Once that gets voted on during the appeal period for endorsement?
I would look for guidance for that. I'm not sure. I apologize.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I would
always kind of-
assume we would. What if we come up with a list of conditions that are required between the next meeting and we have to add something? We print the whole set now and deliver them, and then you make comments and we have to do something. We're going to have to resubmit another whole set again, regardless. So, I mean, the question is, can we provide a PDF set for review and then provide a final printed set that you can sign?
I don't have a problem as long as I get one hard copy with that PDF for the record. If
That's
the
fine with
planning
me.
board feels they need a hard copy to review completely, an interim set or.
as opposed to just the electronic file, the PDF. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
so that they showed they did all the changes, and if they did, we say, good to go. Print up the copies we need for final sets.
Yep.
Endorsing. Fuss and O'Neill receives them that way as well, as a PDF. Would that help, Tim?
Yes, I believe so.
I think we could accommodate that if the planning board is in favor of that.
I'm comfortable with that.
That would be that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Fine with me.
Agreed.
So you straighten out the revisions and send a PDF in early enough before the December 14th meeting so we can take a look at them.
Well, before we get to that, I guess my other question is, if we say no to a continuance and a vote's taken tonight, is the vote on, what's the vote based on? Is it based on the list of conditions that are in this document? Because I don't see much.
You'd be asking us to vote on a plan that part of it we haven't even seen and you haven't seen? Is that right?
I'm asking for clarification, Andrew. That was my question. That's all.
But that's one piece of it that you'd be asking.
Okay.
And I'm not comfortable voting on something I haven't seen, you haven't seen, or the engineers haven't seen, or our consultant hasn't seen.
And that's fine. That's why I'm asking the question in hopes to get a sense of it. So thank you. So I don't believe we really have a choice. So I guess my request would be for continuance to the 14th.
continuing the public hearing, but we can't, continue the hearing until we extend the approval period.
So if we could extend the approval period to the December 18th, I believe is correct, with a hearing on the 14th,
And that's your request,
as my request.
Mr. Mills?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded to extend the approval period to December 18th and to continue the public hearing to December 14th at 7:05. Is that right?
Correct. That's the request. Yep.
Correct.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yeah.
Houlihan, yes.
Okay. Karina will be in touch with you, Tim, to arrange for that meeting by telephone or Zoom or whatever with your team and Fuss and O'Neill.
Mr. Morris, were we gonna take any public comment tonight?
And extend the hearing.
Again, Mimi?
Did we extend both the approval date and the hearing?
Yes, that was all in that one motion. Yes, thank you for reminding me. I'm deficient in opening it up to the public for comment. Sarah?
Okay, sure. Kristen Laval has been waiting. Kristen, you're all set.
Hi, thank you very much. So first, I'm glad that we did make some progress tonight on some of the votes, so appreciate that. But I would be misleading to not express some frustration. I'm going to try to keep this succinct in light of, I know it's a long night for all of you, and I'm sure there's others who want to comment. So first, I just want to reiterate that we desperately need a postmortem or a lean review of this process following. Oh, I'm sorry. I should also note I'm speaking as a public citizen, not as a member of the Rec Commission, because none of my comments have been shared or discussed with the commission. As we discussed last time, we do need a postmortem or a lean review on this process. As a citizen, I'm considering that we should ask the Board of Selectmen to see if there might be someone within the public with experience in conducting such reviews as kind of a non-interested party to help. I shouldn't say non-interested, but someone who hasn't been close to the process to help us identify the issues that occurred specifically, especially in communication bottlenecks and non-value add activity within this process. So my second point is that the process definitely feels archaic. We've had 4 meetings, what seem like we are translating notes from a party that is not here. We have Mr. Musco here, we have Mr. Eddy here. We're all trying to understand what the notes back and forth are. Again, the whole process really feels somewhat archaic, especially if you've worked in the corporate environment, and perhaps it's software that we need, I don't know, but every time it seems like we're translating notes between 3 teams that haven't actually sat down and talked to each other. It was frustrating tonight to hear comments from the chair and the town planner of quotes, things that are easily remedied, or this is unbelievable, or very frustrating, or it would be nice to have certain items labeled differently. I think we've already expressed, we all feel that frustration. And so that's why it has already been proposed that a meeting of all of these teams together would make sense. And had it happened at the beginning of the process, we wouldn't be here today. So Mr. Morris, with all due respect, when you announce that tonight you're requesting with urgency that you're proposing a meeting for all teams to get together, that's already been done. So the fact that it's just happening today, it's frustrating because we're all losing money spending on these consultants to continuously, work through what feels like snail mail to translate these questions and responses. My next point is that I think a lot of perhaps premature assumptions were made based on the structural plans tonight and specifically where the errors occurred. Clearly, there was a version control error. Again, I'll just repeat my note on what might be an archaic process, probably leading or lending itself to those errors. We're working with professionals. I'm sure, that there could have been something that went wrong in the administrative process, but we made an assumption tonight that that was on, and they accepted, and I appreciate that because they're trying to work constructively. But again, I think we need the review to really understand where this version control issue happened before placing blame and stating this is unbelievable, assuming that the error happened on one particular side. That's why we need this review. My last comment, and I'm sorry, again, I'm trying to be respectful, is that sometimes I feel like we are fishing for more issues. Specifically, when we were having the debate on the light spillage, which again is 0.02 100ths of light spillage, which is naked to the eye on a street with lights, and that most of you were willing to go ahead and vote on. And a question was raised, and I don't even know by who actually asked the question, well, are there definitely street lights on that portion of the street? That portion of the street is next to our elementary school. Of course, there are street lights on that major roadway next to our elementary school. So when questions like that are even raised, it can't help but feel like we're looking for reasons to try to stall the proceedings. So lastly, and then I'll be quiet, and I'm not necessarily expecting a response from anyone today. Two things. One, I did feel at one point we were questioning the qualifications of Mr. Eddie, and I just want to thank him for all of his contributions to this very long project that he's been lending his efforts on. And lastly, I also want to thank Tim, who as a new director, and I want to remind everyone, Tim is a new director in this position as of last year. He has picked this project up and really brought it forward. He's not responsible for things that may have happened in the past, but he has done a tremendous job moving it forward. And I think everyone here would agree. So I really want to just take a second to thank Tim for his efforts, along with Mr. Musco and Mr. Eddie and everyone else involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not see any other hands raised at the moment. If anyone else would like to comment, please raise your hand.
Okay,
Seeing none.
just going back to the review of this procedure. At the last meeting, there were comments made that were critical of the whole process, and it seemed to, in some of it, if not all of it, seemed to lean toward the planning board. So as the chairman, I think it's my responsibility to look into that and to see if in fact the board or the planning department caused delays. So I've spent more than a little bit of time going through the history and the documentation of the process of the project, and I'm fully prepared to go through that. I could not find any place, at any time, where the planning board or the planning department caused any kind of a delay. Quite the opposite. The town planner, who fortunately is also an engineer and comes from the consulting world, went way beyond her job by performing hours of review as a team player for the town. If it was private proposal, the correct action would be to send it back and submit it without errors. Submit it, fix it up, and then come back and submit it. It's getting late. It'll take a few minutes to go through this, and I'll be glad to share it with anybody. And I think at the end, you'll see that incomplete plans, inconsistent plans, and long gaps between submittals was the real reason why this has gone the way it has.
Don, can I interject in hopes to speed it along, if I may? I just want to make it a point that I do agree. I think there were many, this has been going on, and I feel like I need to say this to the public as well, in defense somewhat of the planning board, but also the recreation department. We do understand that this was funded from 2017, and it has been worked on in some capacity since 2017, but we do admit that legitimate plans and processes were finally put in place to get things going of March of this year. So when I look at this project, I do see it as March 2020 to current. And I'm willing to admit that. And I don't know if that goes along with anything you're about to say, but I just want to make it known that the Recreation Department is aware that that work was done, but not up to snuff of what was needed, prior to my coming into office. And we took the steps starting in March to get where we need to be. So I do understand, coming from my end as well, the frustration of the public, but, I also do admit, and I fall on the sword to say that true plans and true work on this has been really, has begun and has been really commenced since, I think, Don, I think you and I met the week prior to the shutdown back in March, and we've been going at it ever since. So I just want to make that a point as well, that so I can say that we are not blaming, as the department, we're not blaming the planning board. We understand the delays, and we can't speak to prior administration in our department, but we do recognize that true work has really commenced since March of this year. So I just want to put that out there as I feel this comes up just about every meeting at this point.
Okay, appreciate that, Tim. More to follow on the details, and that's where it's important to look at the real details and the chronology. And I think you'll see that the planning board and the planning department went way beyond what would normally be done as far as effort and timing. So if there's nothing else, we granted the approval, extension of the approval period, and we voted to continue the public hearing. Is there anything else?
We say the time for the public hearing on December 14th.
I think I said 7:05.
Okay.
Was it 7:05? Yeah.
Just making sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Kristen has her hand up again. Oh, she just put it down.
If not, then the next item, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on the 14th. So if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the continued public hearing for the tennis court lights. I'm in a butter, so I will turn the chair over to Mr. Mills and Mrs. Houlihan. You have something?
I am too in a butter, and I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Morris, Marnie. All right, so Karina, can you bring us up to speed on 53 Parkerville Road?
Yes, similarly to the previous running simultaneous project for
Can
Mooney.
you get a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not used to this setup. So at the November 16th, 2020 Planning Board meeting, There was an extension request granted to continue the public hearing to this evening with a approval deadline of December 4th. On November 20th, we received Fuss and O'Neill review comments on submission number 2, plans dated November 9th, 2020. They're distributed to the planning board and to the applicant. On November 25th, we provided a draft decision of the major site plan approval with conditions and a list of waivers. And that brings us to this evening. This afternoon, around a little shortly after 5, we received response comments to Fuss and O'Neill's last set of comments dated November 20th. So Travers submitted response comments today, dated, we'll just call them today's date. I'm not sure you had a chance to review them, but similarly, there are some responses here. So I just want to point out that in the response to by Travers, the waivers weren't granted yet. They were just discussed at the prior meeting. So we have to formally go through and approve and grant the waivers if that's the choice of the planning board.
Understood. That was my mistake.
Oh, that's okay. Sometimes it's confusing.
So, Karina, can we go through the list of items that the responses were? Because I know when I looked at them before and we discussed this, they didn't seem like we had as many complicated things as the last one.
Correct.
So-
I don't think so. So do you want to go through the Fuss and O'Neill or through the Travers? I think I will go through the Fuss and O'Neill. That was their last set of comments. And then Travers can speak to the responses, I suppose.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Fuss and O'Neill's review comments from November. Item number 2, and if you do have them, Sarah, you could put them up.
The Fuss and O'Neill comments you'd like?
Yeah, November 20th, Fuss and O'Neill for the tennis courts.
Sure.
All right, so number 2, the comment was for butters list. We're all set with that. We received it. We have it here at the office, but we didn't forward it to Fuss and O'Neill. Number 3 was a waiver for the 300 feet within of the property lines of the site for ownership, zoning, use, and general location. Again, the property is so large and the project area is so small that it wouldn't be conducive to not waive that requirement. Number 7 from Fuss and O'Neill. And again, the numbers jump because Fuss and O'Neill provides one big set of comments at the beginning, and as the comments fall off, we keep the same numbers of the comments that were there so that it's not confusing. So that's why there are less and less comments each time, but the numbers are not consecutive. Number 7 was a waiver request for showing existing trees on the site, which are caliber of 6 inches or larger. Number 9 comment was a potential waiver for major site plan submissions to include wetlands. When we go through the waivers, we'll say the reasons why they are requesting the waiver. Number 10 was will culminate in a waiver request, location of some for drainage, including drainage and detailed piping, etc. That's not part of the project. Number 11 was will culminate in a waiver for from 2-foot topography contour intervals. Number 15 was a condition, a comment that requires a revision. The photometric plans shall show the intensity of illumination expressed in foot candles at ground level. I believe some of the Moscow plans were still at 3 foot above grade, which although is standard in some areas, our bylaw says at grade. And it said that Moscow was going to revise those. See attached updated Moscow plans. Upon this current review, the updated Moscow plans indicating 0 grid horizontal. This is number 15. and zero grid max vertical measurements outside the tennis courts still include 3 feet above grade measurements in the grid summary. Measurements should be updated to be from at grade height in addition to the plans indicated. Provide the project summary sheet updated with new calculation numbers to show at grade. I believe that from what I reviewed, whether it's at grade or at 3 in this instant may not make a difference because they're achieving 0 foot candles relatively close to the tennis court itself, and they're not approaching the property lines that could impact the abutters. Number 41 refers to, can you scroll down, Sarah, number 41? Electrical plans and design. So the lighting control would recommend to include a sequence of operations based on the conditions in the variance of the electric. And Musco has provided the sequence in their spec, is what they said. The comment was that the sequence is not included in the spec, included in the report of the ZBA conditions that indicates the light operation indicated on drawing G101. So if I'm not mistaken, that is added on sheet G101, but that the electrical contractor, they recommend the electrical drawing reference back to G101 so the electrical contractor is prepared to conduct programming required once the Musco controls are installed on site. If the controls are pre-programmed, I would indicate as such on the electrical or drawing so contractor can provide an accurate fee for bid. So again, that was the electrical plans referring that the lighting hours are on sheet G101. So it was a clear connection. B, based on the conditions of the variance, the light fixture controls will be publicly accessible from the court to allow for manually turning the fixtures for a duration of 30 minutes. Light fixtures should not be able to be turned on unless natural light has fallen below a certain foot candle threshold, which should be detected by a photocell. Confirm these control devices will be specified. The response was lights have the ability to be manually controlled. So this is similar to the last item, and I believe Mike Berry can talk to this after that. Those controls will be controlled by Recreation Department. And when we go through the conditions, that's listed in there, so we can address it then. C, the Musco controller on sheet ES2 is not specified on the plans and is indicated outside the electrical enclosure that contains the panel and contractor enclosure. Recommend providing specs for the controller and detail how the controller interfaces with the contacts. Photo cell should be specified as part of the controller as required by IEC. Musco indicates the controller is by Musco. Fuss and O'Neill felt that didn't address the review comment. Musco to respond to the photocell controller installation inquiry. It appears the controller will be separate from the electrical distribution enclosure per the detail power one-line diagram on ES2. Therefore, Musco will need to indicate on drawings how this controller will be installed on site, i.e. is the enclosure rated for exterior installation? Will it be mounted on a pad? Will it be pad or grade mounted, or will it require vertical structural support assembly for mounting? Provide dimensions of controller. And you can see another item there, the contractor box 2 from the note pointing to the NEMA 3R. So this is what, Mike, you can address these after when we're talking in the conditions. Then under general design, this was regarding Tree City. The submitted plans do not indicate proposed trees in this, so is your applicant, okay, so I think when it comes to the trees, the point was to protect the trees that are there. There wasn't anything about adding additional trees at this point. And then the last was about the erosion control. I believe that was amended to meet the conservation's requirements in their request for determination. And the erosion control is now shown more extensive around the tennis court to protect the wetlands, I believe, to the north there. And lastly, Fuss and O'Neill requested, and I agree with this, the applicant should provide a detail of the horizontal and vertical separation of a utility crossing with the electrical conduit. So typically, the plans would include a detail if you're crossing over a water line. And in this case, with the electrical conduit running up the access driveway, they'll be crossing over a water line. So they should show, the separation distance required and what material is put in between and how that's backfilled, et cetera. Standard detail. And that's all that Fuss and O'Neill had comments on. So the majority were waivers, which we'll list. And then there were some technical lingering comments that still had to be addressed.
Okay. So.
Which Travers submitted this afternoon response to those comments. Those final comments.
So, Travers, can you go over the ones that are not waiver requests? Your response?
Sure, I can do that. So the first one that's not a waiver request was a discussion about the zero grid, horizontal and zero grid max vertical measurements outside the tennis court, and showing plans that are at the zero grid. I got those plans after the submission, that the lighting levels on that don't even cross beyond the parking lot. So we don't start to encroach onto any property lines whatsoever anywhere on the site. And if you want, Karina, I can share those if you'd like to see those as well.
So you're saying you have updated plans that show zero grade?
Yeah, well, it came up in the comments after, and I got these after the last submission. So they're just the Musco photometrics that show the 0 foot above. But again, that 0 foot above doesn't trespass. It doesn't even trespass the parking lot. So we're not crossing we're not even close to property lines. We're well outside the setback of the property lines. We're outside the 50-foot easement.
So if you're at zero grade, is it more conservative or less conservative than 3 feet?
If we're at zero grade, are you at more conservative? I mean, it's obviously going to show light spilling further because you're going 3 feet further.
So it's up to the board if they want to have final approved plans include those sheets at 0. Because I think originally they were, and then something happened where they went back to 3.
Yeah, we were asked to make updates, and when those other sheets got pulled out, there were some adjustments that weren't caught. And then as this one came back, I got these almost 2 days after we submitted.
Okay, so you have them 0 grade?
I do have them at 0 height, yeah.
So you could include those in the final plan set?
That's what and I'd be willing to share those if you would want to see those now. You can see that they don't cross the property line.
Yeah, that's up to Andrew. Andrew, you want to see the revised
Yeah,
plans?
can you share it right now?
Yeah.
Sarah, can you give control over?
Yep, Art, you should be all set.
Can you see that? Are they up? Probably not. Hold on.
Yep,
Yeah,
we can see them.
Oh, you can see them?
Yes.
Did I just move them? Hold on. Wait, can you see those?
Yes.
Very small.
Okay, hold on. Working on it.
And Seattle's winning, I see too.
Oh, yeah. Hold on 1 second. Of course, they're frozen. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, just so I can. All right, can you see that? Is that better? So this is the horizontal at 0 grid. You can see it's 0 feet above grade on a 10 foot by 10 foot spacing. You can see the red numbers on my cursor indicate the zeros and the spillage. So this is the property line, this far line. This line is the easement. So we're not even inside of the existing tree line. We're still at zero grid. You have these trees here, which obviously will create a buffer, and then you have a heavy tree line along this edge that'll create a buffer. So we don't spill into that property line. And then the vertical grid at zero, you can see the same. The red line, the red numbers represent the zero. Again, we're not within that existing tree line other than the existing trees that are there. We're off the property line for that area, and then we're also outside of the setback. So we don't even encroach on the setback.
Okay, so that's good. So if you put those in the final approved set, that solves that comment.
And then I would indicate the same, that this would be stamped by Vinny. I guess I would assume we would need to do the same thing.
Correct.
Yeah. Mimi, while we have this up, and also Jesse, any questions on the photometric plan?
No questions.
All set.
Okay. I have one question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I see from the western side, right?
Yeah.
Why does the light trespass equally go over on, I guess I call it the far left court? Why does it go further off than the other one? I'm just curious.
Where?
The light trespass seems to extend closer to the road for the school. And I'm going to call it the left court.
Yeah, the left court.
Than it does on the other area, where everything else kind of seems, it does it on both ends, both the north and the
Inches
south.
in those corners.
I'm just curious how that happens.
Mike, do you want to address that?
Honestly, it's really just the aiming and the direction of where the poles are located. I mean, you can tell that basically from this that it's not a cookie cutter stamped kind of submittal, that it is actually a computer generated output based on the aiming of logic of each one of those fixtures. So I don't know if looking at it real close, if they're all, I mean, you've got some variation on some of the pole locations, and each one of those shifts is going to tweak the aiming angle, which then just, relays that to a little bit more spill on one side than the other.
You can also see that in the green number in the middle. So you have a 64.7, which is kind of like what we call a little bit of a hot spot. It's not quite a hot spot, but you're getting more light concentration in that area to cover further across that court. So we adjusted obviously some of the light pole distances to deal with some of the existing conditions. We know we have an existing path coming from the parking lot, so we had to shift that pole in. So you get some just different light distributions from that.
Thank you. All right, we can go to the next one.
Hold on one second. I'm just trying to open my comments. The next one, so we went through that. The next one was all related to the controller. So the next comments were really regarding number 41, A, B, and C. Were related to the controller, which we discussed. Again, the controller would be the same. The rec department has the ability to set and manage that controller to meet the guidelines of the zoning approval. And they were asking, there was a question about details for the controller. Can you see that as well? Can you see?
Well, first, before you go there, on the part A, right?
Yes.
They agreed to add a note on the electrical plans that will refer to G101, right?
That's correct. We would, yeah. So the G101 refers to the zoning board
Criteria.
Their order of conditions. So that is on the notes on our plans. So in that reference, we would be referring back to the notes for the conditions for the zoning board approval. C discusses control devices. Again, all the lighting control devices are part of the Musco package, so it's a complete package. And then timing and will be controlled by the rec panel. So anything in the zoning board appeals will be able to be set by the recreation, Parks and Recreation. And then the last one was about the contractor box. And if it's a NEMA 3R enclosure, it is a NEMA 3R enclosure. And control is rather resistant. It's on the same pad as the transformer. It's rated to be outside. And we can show that on the plans.
So just for my clarity, again, because I have a mixture of memory from when this originally got approved from the CPC. A prior director explaining how the lights would work and how they're going to work now. On this one, when the proposal first came to us on the CPC, we were told that the individuals who wanted to play could turn on the lights so they could play, but they go off at a certain time. From what you just said, it sounds like Tim is going to have the ability. It sounds like someone's going to have to call Tim and say, hey, can I play tonight? And we haven't turned on. Is that right?
What we have set up here is Tim would set the program, say from sunset to 9 o'clock, whatever the curfew is. So the lights would be allowed to be turned on, but they wouldn't actually turn on unless somebody's there to hit the push button to turn the lights on.
Okay.
So this alleviates them from being on from sunset till 9 o'clock every night because somebody might show up to play tennis. This turns them on only when somebody's there to play tennis.
That's fun. Thank you.
Yep.
Jesse, Mimi, any questions?
Do any of these have to?
Nope.
Okay. Do any of these have to be, just quickly, oh, never mind, Marty, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mimi.
Amy, I'm sorry.
So is this similar questions from Fuss and O'Neill to the previous project? Does this require a discussion with them to sort this out?
One discussion should really address both projects. But again, I mean, if they read through kind of the conditions of the zoning board approval, it would probably answer most of their questions that they've come up with. But yeah, one conversation should address both projects because it's the same, they put in the same comments for both.
Okay.
So you anticipate that when you talk to Fuss and O'Neill, it will resolve B and C? Mike or Art? When the conversation is had with Fuss and O'Neill, the goal is to come to terms with B and C of number 41. The programming and the controller.
Yep.
Yes.
So there's a common understanding of what you're proposing, it's clarified, and then they understand that what they're looking for, they couldn't find there because it wasn't clear.
Yeah, we'll kind of go through how the controller works, what its capabilities are, how it addresses their concerns, and hopefully from there, they'll have an understanding and can move forward from here.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, Mimi or Jesse? All right.
The final few comments, the Tree City USA. There was a comment last time, and I think it was made by you folks about the planting required in the zoning board conditions. We did add plantings on the plans. Those were added. They are native plants. So we are also meeting that native tree planting on that. To that, we didn't add additional trees, but I think that was discussed. The last two comments look like were determined on the erosion control. Fuss and O'Neill said refer to planning board to confirm acceptability, major site plan reviewing zoning. So we have made those updates. I think he made that comment. You asked for a detail for water crossing. We did have a detail for water crossing, but it was removed. It's supposed to go to the electrical plans. We'll add that detail back to the electrical plans.
Perfect.
That's all we had.
Let's see. I'd like to see, Sarah, are there any comments from the public?
Let me just. Could you just?
Stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
In the meantime, Tim, do you have anything to add?
A little easier.
Nope.
I don't see any hands up at the moment
Okay.
from the audience.
So Mimi and Jesse, from your perspectives, I think that the items are different for this application that need to get resolved compared to the prior one. Are you comfortable proceeding with approving this evening with conditions on the electrical getting updated for the crossing and the finalization of the control panel? And then we proceed, or do you want to wait until that actually gets all updated, because we still need it on the final plan anyhow?
I'm comfortable with those being conditions on an approval.
Maybe.
I'd prefer that the conversation with Fuss and O'Neill happen and the lighting get all sorted out and agree that it meets their comments or addresses their comments.
Okay. All right. So.
Andrew, we also have the waivers in the.
Yeah, no, I know we have the waivers too. We kind of ran through those last time briefly. And
Yeah.
did a straw poll where we stood on that. I was just trying to get an idea. So we could vote on the waivers if we want to go through that. And then discuss the next steps after that. So Sarah, can you bring up the waiver requests?
Sarah, are you looking for the waivers?
Yeah, I have it. I'm just.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you heard
One
us.
second, I'm just switching back and forth.
Okay.
So many files. Alrighty, all set. Sorry about that.
All right. So let's see, waiver requests. So the was the 300 feet property lines
Would you like me to read them quickly and then you
waiver
can?
from zoning. Yeah, you want to read them?
Yeah, and then you can have a motion and grant or not grant. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waiver requests. The first one, waiver request from 17410B2A, major site plan submission shall include ownership, zoning, and use, general location of structures deposited within 300 feet of the property lines. The entire site covers 80 acres with project work area less than 1 acre, which with limited impact. It's requested that the site plan provided is sufficient. So that's because the size of the lot is so big, that work area is relatively small. So a waiver is typically granted when something like this comes up. They don't have to show 300 feet beyond the whole parcel.
Okay. So Jesse and Mimi, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for a motion, and Mimi, if you don't second it, well, what if I don't ask for it, then I want to discuss it or I'm not comfortable with it. Jesse, if you don't make the motion, I'll know you have an issue with it. And Mimi, if you don't second it, I know you're not comfortable with it. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to ask, is there a motion for this waiver?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, All those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Oh, that one is granted. Okay, next one.
Waiver number 2 from section 174-10B 2B 13, major site plan submissions shall include existing trees on the site which are caliber of 6 inches or larger. I see the typo there. In review of Google Street, the applicant says, it appears there may be more trees with a caliber of 6 inches or larger than the number of trees shown on the plan. It is requested that trees only located within 25 feet of the limit of work are shown. The site is 86 acres and identifying every 6-inch tree or larger would be cumbersome, and other than those located near the limit of work would be impacted.
Jesse, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
All right. All those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell,
You. Next one.
Third waiver, from section 174-10B 2B 14, major site plan submission shall include wetlands. Applicant indicates the wetlands in question are located well outside the limit of work. Those wetlands that are adjacent and would be impacted by the plan are shown on the plan. It is requested that the site plan is sufficient.
So the appropriate, we're at the appropriate time to have a motion to grant this waiver. Is there a motion, Jesse?
So moved.
second,
Yep, moved.
All those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Thank you.
The
Next.
fourth waiver is waiver from zoning, section 174-10B 2B 15, major site plan submission shall include drainage, including detail, design, date, piping, etc. The plan includes drainage directly related to the limit of work. There's no drainage or grading work as part of the project. It is requested that the site plan is sufficient.
Is there a motion to approve this waiver request?
Moved.
Jesse?
Second,
All those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
And last one, Corinne?
Oh, I'm sorry. And the last one, waiver from zoning 174-10B 2B 17. Major site plan submission shall include topography at 2-foot contour intervals. Again, applicant says drainage for the entire site would be cumbersome and not impacted by this project. There's no drainage or grading work as part of this project. It is requested that the site plan is sufficient.
So Jesse, is there a motion to approve this waiver request?
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Okay. So we got the waivers done. Decision. Conditions, do we, the draft conditions, are there any to go over for that? At this point?
We can quickly go through them, and I'll just briefly state the boilerplate ones. I won't read them all. And then if we just recap the ones that are highlighted, which are the lingering technical questions to be incorporated into the revised plans. Is that all right?
Yep.
Mr. Acting Chair,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I have a couple of conditions that I'd like to add.
Okay, can we go through the ones we have first and then get to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, condition number 1 is a standard boilerplate about typical requirements for site plan. Number 2 directs attention that all restrictions and conditions from other boards and commissions shall be complied with, and attention is brought to the variance by the ZBA back in 2017 for the light height. Number 3 is the standard lighting condition for review for 1 year. Number 4 is the first specific one.
Sarah, can you move it down? Thank you.
So, as we pointed out in the last one, all Musco lighting plans, including the final approved plans, shall be stamped by a professional engineer, and we crossed off prior to building permit application. So that would not be included. And I believe Art Eddie will get the electrical engineer to stamp those.
I'm comfortable with that. I assume Jesse and Mimi, you are too, for the last one? Okay, got a thumbs up and a head nod. Great. All right,
And Art agrees to that, right?
he's on mute.
Is Art Eddie there?
Yes, yes, sorry. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Number 5, again, the cover should be stamped with a revision date, and then all the plan sheets should have endorsement lines. Art, you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, did you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
What? Perfect. Thank you.
Want me to continue, Andrew?
Yes, please.
Okay, number 5 is crossed off. That was a carryover from the prior project, from the other project. These light poles are all labeled properly across all the sheets. So no problem there. Number 7, this is based on Fuss and O'Neill's comment number 15 about the foot candles at ground level. They already indicated that they'll fix that down to grade 0 and put that in the approved plan set. So when that comes in, this condition will be removed
Okay.
once we receive that. Number 8 is based on Fuss and O'Neill's comments 14A and B. The electrical plan shall include a reference to plan sheet G101 for lighting of hours, operation programming requirement condition. So they agreed, the applicant agreed to make that note referencing back to G101. So when that comes in, that'll be, this condition will be removed. And then when they talk to Fuss and O'Neill about the controller and those comments related to the technical comments there, then that is also included in there. That condition can go away too if that's addressed. Is that correct, Art?
Yes.
Number 10, indicate how the Muscal controller will be installed on site and provide construction detail. I think that's based on Fuss and O'Neill 41C.
Okay.
Right, so that's this, that will be addressed as well. Clarified. Correct, Art?
Yes.
Okay. And that will come off once that's addressed. Number 11, provide a water crossing detail for final approve. I believe the applicant indicated or the consultant indicated they'll return that back onto the plan sheets. Is that correct, Art?
Yeah, you want the hours of use and from the zoning board hearing?
No, this is about the water crossing detail.
Yes, we'll put that back on the plans. It'll be on the electrical plans.
Okay, and you already, yeah,
Will
you're
that
gonna,
be like PDF like we talked about on the other one, and we're gonna wait for a final, once you get the final approval, you have the final set done, or? Is that
That's
what you're
correct.
thinking?
Well, yeah, depending on how Tim wants to proceed, then if that's the case, yes, we would provide PDFs similar to how we did in the last meeting.
And Jesse and Mimi, I assume you guys are comfortable with that?
That's fine.
Maybe
okay.
just give me
And,
a thumbs up. Good. Good. Next one.
number 12, light fixtures shall be no greater than 5,700 degrees Kelvin color temperature to reduce blue light. I believe that's already on the Muscal.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
All light fixtures will be controlled by state-of-the-art computer control system. That's just a generic, making sure that that's what happens. Then the hours of lighting use, these were taken directly from number 14, were taken from the ZBA variance. And I believe, as in the prior, for Mooney, we would strike this condition because we already are referencing to the zoning variance in condition number 2.
I would advocate for that as well. Jesse and Mimi, comfortable with that? Thumbs up from Jesse.
Yeah.
Head nod from Mimi. Okay.
And number 15, through 16, 17, all the way through 21 are all standard.
Okay.
That we discussed under Mooney too, but they're the typical utilities underground, when to bring plans, when we need PDFs for the finals, pre-construction activities and information, and as-built. And then lastly, attention is brought to that Board of Selectmen poll hearing will be required for the utility poles. And that's it.
So Mimi, you said you had a couple of things you wanted to add?
Yes. The first is that there is landscaping being added, the screening as required by the CBA conditions. So I would ask that the standard landscaping language be added, that landscaping shall be in conformance with the plans and submitted by the applicant and approved by the planning board. Such landscaping shall be maintained, repaired, or replaced by the applicant as needed to maintain compliance with the plans.
And since they've already agreed that they're going to be native, would you like it to be specific that they're native, Mimi?
Well, they're on the plans and they are native on the plan. So in conformance with the plans, they'll all be native.
Okay.
And
You
then
can add
the other request was for the trees that are currently on the site, that if any are damaged or killed during the process, that they be replaced, because those are currently providing screening.
Tim, are you in agreement with that one?
Yeah, I don't anticipate us affecting it, so I'm comfortable with that. Art, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's totally fine with me. Makes sense.
Maybe can we just be a little bit more specific? Are you saying within 25 feet of the tennis court? If any die within a certain time frame? Because I'm curious how you want to define that, because when they put the underground cable in, right? You're saying if they disturb the roots and kill the tree, we might not know that for a year, right?
Right.
So are you saying, but again, I think it's only fair to define it specifically within, I think we're only asking them to mark the trees within 25 feet of, was it 25 feet of the tennis courts? The waiver, I think it was.
Yeah. Yes. And there are certain trees that are identified that are going to have tree protection around them because the work comes close to them. It would be those trees that are identified on the plans.
All right. So is it fair to say only those trees identified on the plan that it work's coming close to, if they die within a year, they get replaced?
Yes, because the other ones shouldn't be affected by this at all.
Okay. Art, Tim, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right. And I forgot to ask, Tim, are you comfortable with all the other conditions we reviewed?
Yes, I am.
Great. So I think, Karina, correct me if I'm wrong, we're at the point where if we were ready to vote, we'd vote, but we're going to, it sounds like the board would like to have that meeting with Fuss and O'Neill to make sure they're comfortable with the control panel. So Tim, similar to what we did on the last public hearing, you'd have the option of, what Don went through before. Either we could try to rush and get something done on Friday when the approval period ends, or you could request an extension, extend the approval period, and we'd meet again on the 14th at 7:10 p.m. To go through this and just put a nice bow on it.
We'll be there anyway, so we might as well. So
Okay.
I'll make a request to extend approval period till the 18th with a hearing on the 14th at 7:10 PM.
Is there a motion to accept that request, Jesse?
So moved.
Amy?
Second,
All right, all those in favor? Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Marina, are we missing anything?
Did you continue the public hearing?
I think that was in the motion.
That was a double extend the approval period and
Yep.
continue the public hearing.
To 7:10 PM on the 14th.
That was a roll call.
Yep.
We will prepare those extension requests tomorrow for signature.
Right. Any other questions or comments with 53 Parkerville Road?
Did you open it to the public?
I did earlier. We can open
You
it
did,
again if
okay.
there.
I do
Sarah,
not
is there-
see anyone else in the public attempting to comment. No hands raised.
Well, Art, Mike, and Tim, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Hopefully everything goes smoothly. I know since Karina and Sarah are going to be working with you anyhow with Fuss and O'Neill, you can bang that one out hopefully quickly. That's the only real remaining obstacle on this one.
It'll be a nice
that
Christmas present.
That said,
Karina, don't jinx this. So
No, I think this is going in the right direction.
10:30 PM, you heard it. Okay. So, all right, everybody, thank you.
thank you. Sarah, if
you.
we have Marnie and Dawn still around, you can bring them back and I will peacefully relinquish my chairmanship back
Thanks,
to the chair.
Mike.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Art and Tim.
Am I back?
You are. I peacefully relinquish the chair back to you, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, former acting chair. Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion item. EDC Downtown Initiative bylaw status. Who's got this one?
I'll take it, I guess. So there was a meeting last Tuesday before the holiday where I think there was a lot of really good discussion in regards to the downtown initiative and where it's going. There is definitely some consensus reached in terms of gross floor area ratio and some height requirements. There's still some work to be done, and it's obviously has to come through this board for public hearing. But I think that everything is really moving in the right direction.
Tell the public who attended the meeting.
Oh, Judy Barrett, the consultant, was able to attend this particular meeting. So it was a lot of back and forth with her. I think that she said a few times that she found the discussion to be very helpful in continuing to craft a final draft that can go through the public hearing process.
The Board of Select.
Also in attendance were the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, SHOPSI. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we attended that and it was excellent, very productive, a lot of input, and Judy was pleased that she had information to move it on to the next steps. Excellent. Any questions or comments on this agenda item? Downtown Initiative. Okay, next item on the agenda is the planner's report.
Okay, just quickly, just want to let you know I'm going to be out of the office Wednesday to Friday. But I'll be back on Monday. Sarah will be covering the office. Appreciate that.
Wishes during that time.
Sorry?
I said best wishes to you during that time, Karina.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. We had to make a slight change to the planning board schedule for 2021. The annual town meeting is scheduled for March 20th, as opposed to what we thought, March 27th. So we're going to include March 20th as a planning board meeting date, and we're going to change the March 27th one we had. We're going to remove March 27th and add March 29th instead of March 22nd, and it keeps a nice every 2-week pace that way. Just shifting when the annual town meeting is. That calendar is on the Dropbox, and if the planning board approves of that change, we'll post it up on the website.
Can you say one more time, Karina? So that's moving to the 20th. What is that moving
I'm
to?
sorry. So we have a March 8th meeting, and then the town meeting is March 20th. And then we'll have a March 29th regular planning board meeting. And then the next one will be April 12th.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it looks like this. Oh,
I
that's
can-
backwards. Never mind.
I
Sometimes
can pull it
it's
up if we need to.
Sorry.
No,
Okay.
that's okay.
So if the planning board's okay with that, we'll make that minor revisions because you already voted on that calendar previously. Is that okay, Don?
Sure.
Okay. I forwarded everybody an email from town council about changes to the provisions during the state of emergency and permitting that the effective December 1st is when the tolling continues again on permitting projects, but we don't have anything that started prior and was held off until now. The planning board actually started hearing meetings and A&Rs and public hearings back in July sometime, maybe earlier. So we're all set. There's nothing for now impacting us. You may be aware, Tom LaFlamme, the IT director, resigned. His last day was last Friday. I forwarded you an email today about procedures and who's helping out while they're looking for a replacement. So if you know anybody, I believe the Board of Selectmen are looking for somebody if they don't have someone on their scope already. Stonebrook Village, I got an email today that said there was a question about the plantings between the two properties there and they weren't sufficient. The developers agreed to install the 16 green giant arborvitaes in addition to the white pines that had been installed. And once they're installed, they will come back before the board with an updated as-built plan. I haven't responded to him yet, so if anybody has a question or conflict at that, you can individually email me tomorrow with any feedback.
Was that response from Dan?
Yes, that was from Dan Ruiz. He's the
Thank
property
you.
manager for Capital Group Properties.
Yep.
Developer for Stonebrook Village. I forwarded you an email about Mass DOT is looking to brief public officials on the I-90 bridge replacement project. They're targeting December 3rd. So I forwarded that email to you. If you look in your inbox, if you're interested, it's a Zoom meeting and they're going to talk about that project. Lastly, the warrant is closing on December 15th for the annual town meeting on March 20th, 2021. Any of the warrant articles that were being pushed forward from the prior town meeting schedule are going to be already on the warrant, so we don't need new placeholders. I don't know how that affects the EDC's bylaw amendment because they have to come back for public hearing for theirs. So just so you know, that time frame is coming and approaching fast. And that's all I have.
Any
If you have any questions.
questions, comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. We keep the same speakers for the proposed warrant articles as we had last year.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion.
Come on.
Is there a second?
Right, second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Diane, yes.
Latrell, yes, but I may need a refresher on who was doing what.
Houlihan, yes.
Very good. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes, November 16th, 2020.
So moved.
We don't have them, do we?
No, we don't have them.
I'm sorry, you're thinking about the previous ones. We will have two sets, and it's not due to Kate. Kate has provided them to me, and in the circumstances, and I hadn't been in last week. Sarah's been covering a lot of work. We haven't been able to quickly review them, but we'll have them as well as the November 24th, I believe, ready for the December 14th planning board.
Excellent. Our next meeting is December 14th. I think that kills the agenda for tonight. Any questions or comments? Mimi, unmute.
Have we heard anything back from town council on roof signs?
So I spoke with Katie over at the building department, and she had indicated that Lori had already kind of received something, a feedback from Aldo that roof signs are not allowed like in town, and they were going to continue to kind of work through their process and get back to me. So I can follow up, but they were confident that they didn't need Aldo to opine on whether or not the roof sign should be there in the first place. So we're kind of still in a gray area.
So, and just piling on that one, also, I don't know if you noticed, but the little strip mall across the street from it, Zumi, there are 3 roof signs on that building.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I think that there, are several signs that are, existing roof signs. So.
And the other piece, I know I've talked with Karina, and I think Don's brought this up in the past. If you go a little further west on Route 9, the Granite Guy, I know it's changed ownership, but they're not supposed to have granite out by the road. And I know that's a beautiful 2 slabs of marble granite or whatever that is out there, but I know that's been addressed with them. Maybe it was different management, but while the an enforcement officer is out there, maybe they can just send them a reminder about that as well.
Send Laurie a quick email.
So maybe
indicating that
I'll
there was a
follow up
question.
with Lori and Katie to see how, how that's going. I know that they were still continuing to try to look through their records to find, anything related to that particular sign. And, they were thinking that, they may be able to uncover some records. So I will follow up.
So my question is that our report was pending opinion from town council, and if we don't get it, what happens to the report?
Then we just do the best we can with what we have.
Right, the zoning board doesn't actually have to follow the recommendation of the planning board. The bylaw says that, the conditions are listed there, but ultimately they make the decision. It's nice if they, listen or pay attention to those conditions.
Right, but they can't act until they receive a report, but our report was contingent upon receipt of an opinion by town council.
I have to revisit it with Sarah. We'll look
Yeah,
at it.
so it's still in a draft form. I haven't obviously given it to them. I can follow up with, Lori, but the discussion I had with Katie was that, they already had an opinion from Aldo that might suffice. So I will follow up to see if I can get a copy of that.
Sarah, when's
And
that
if-
ZBA meeting? When are they scheduled for ZBA? December 16th?
Yes.
Something like that, right?
Yep.
Okay.
In like
We-
2 weeks.
Yeah. So we can look into it pretty and follow up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right.
All set, Mimi?
Yes,
Anything,
thank
We're
you.
on it.
We're on it.
anything else from the board?
No, I'd just like to publicly recognize that Sam Stivers is doing his due diligence and going beyond, above and beyond as a site, listening to us this late hour. So thank you, Sam.
Kate,
Yes.
anything to say? Anything to add?
No, nothing. It's nice to see you all.
Nice to see you.
Oh, this is a little late.
Yes, it
Almost
is.
midnight.
Keeping it under 4 hours, though.
I appreciate that. You know, that's my limit.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mills,
Second,
motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell,
Houlihan, yes.
See you next time. Thanks so
Night,
much.
night.
Good night.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.